That's right. All right. Let's see, I guess we're ready to get started. Everybody on the right here, my right, ready to start? Yes? Everybody on the left, ready to start? All right.
I'm ready to go.
Guess we're good. Well, welcome to the November 15th Medfield Board of Selectmen meeting. This meeting will be held in a hybrid format. The Board of Selectmen will attend in person, and members of the public may attend in person, and many of them already have. In addition, members of the public who wish to participate via Zoom may do so by joining on one of the links that's provided. So if you go to the town website and you download tonight's agenda for the November 15th meeting, there is a link under item 1 that will let you join in by Zoom. Just for everybody here that's in the room, this meeting is being video recorded and live streamed on Medfield TV by our even more experienced Medfield person here who runs all our meetings, Mike, who I understand had a birthday last Thursday. And so
Happy belated.
Happy birthday, Mike, just to start off here. Glad to have you. You don't look a day older than, you don't more than 2 weeks older than 2 weeks ago when we had a meeting. We want to take a moment right now just to express appreciation for our troops serving around the globe in defense of our country. Thank you. Okay. We have a pretty full agenda today. The very first appointment we have is oh, yes, thank you. Frank who? Frank who? Frank, yes, we should, I had that in my mind until I wished Mike a happy birthday and then totally lost it. Would also, for those of you here, I'm glad, thank you, would like to welcome our new Assistant Town Administrator, Frank Gervasio, first meeting of our Board of Selectmen meeting, at least, that we've had here. So welcome aboard, glad to have you here. Started yesterday, just yesterday. Yeah, I was saying, which morning did I miss your, when it was just yesterday. So welcome, we're delighted to have you here, and we aim to keep you entertained.
Welcome.
And where are you from? Where do you actually live, Frank? Holliston. Yep. So not too far away. All right, and let's move ahead with item number 1. Public hearing, change of manager, Bullard's Market and Package Store, Inc., from Andrew S. Goldberg as the last approved licensed manager to Paul Noonan. Is there you're here to present? You can. I should have mentioned, if you do speak from the audience, we'd ask you, the best place to speak from is the podium there. That's the feedback from people who are tuning in on Medfield TV. We also have the Bill Massaro honorary microphone, and so in some cases when we have an ongoing question and answer session going, you can use Bill's mic, but if I would ask you to go ahead and use that, the audio comes over better that way.
I'm Paul Noonan.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. I don't know what I need to do at this point.
Give your experience in operating a retail package store.
Okay, I've been working at Bullard's for 37 years now. I've been in a managerial position there for approximately 25 of those years. Unfortunately, my predecessor passed away, so we're looking for someone to hold the license, and I have the most seniority, and I consider myself suited for it.
Oh, good.
Very good. Any questions?
No, I have frequented that location. I know it's a good location, so we're good.
Yeah, that's, I was going to say, if you've been here that long, you've been doing a pretty good job.
Not too bad.
Pete?
No questions.
So no questions, just keep up the good work, I guess.
There
Could
we
I
go.
get a motion, please?
Let's see, I would move to
Approve,
approve
change of manager.
change of manager at the Bullard's Market and Package Store from Andrew S. Goldberg, the last approved licensing manager, to Paul Noonan.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next item that we have is Chief Garrett to request the appointment of John McKenna as a full-time police officer. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening. First of all, welcome, Frank. I'll just tell you to buckle up. Yeah, we come with good news tonight. We were able to secure
That was a public safety announcement, incidentally.
we were able to secure a lateral transfer for civil service status for Officer McKenna.
Excellent.
He meets the requirements for us to hire full-time and would like to join our forces, so I respectfully request that you make that appointment happen.
Questions, comments?
Nope, this is the gentleman you referenced, I want to say, a meeting or two ago, so you gave us his background on that meeting, and I'm excited. I'm happy for you and
Yeah.
your team.
Yeah, we were very excited to pick up the civil service status. That's very hard to do right now. We actually have a second candidate that would like to come here. We were unable to get a transfer status, but he did sign as a new hire, so he is actually finishing up the requirements for civil service this upcoming week, and I expect to be before you to hire him in another week or so, or whenever you meet again.
Excellent.
Oh, that's great news, good.
Yep. These are both officers who are fully trained. Officer McKenna will have to go to the Bridge Academy to complete the rest of the new requirements by post. The second officer, if we do appoint him, is fully trained, so he'll just have to go through a brief in-service training program with us, and then we'll be ready to be on solo patrol.
Great.
That's great.
Chief, I wasn't familiar with the term Bridge Academy. It sounds like it's some sort of refresher course or something.
So what happened is when the police reform bill came out, it upped the standards for police officers. So it said that anybody who acts in this capacity has to perform patrol functions, so they can't simply go work details. And if they haven't attended a full-time academy, they have to complete the requisite hours, the same as the 820 I went through and all of the other members of the department. So they've offered a program to say, we acknowledge the first 300 and some odd hours that you did, but we're going to require you to do the next 500. They've broken it down into 3 segments, just by alphabetical. So I had Officer Cronin completed it, and Officer Hamano completed it for us last year, and this year it will be Officer McKenna. And then I don't think we have anybody else for the third round.
In calendar time, how long does it take for an officer to go through Bridge Academy?
So they're allowed to do a great portion of it online, so they do it at their own pace and typically at their own cost. There are 3 weeks that they have to attend in person. Firearms training, EVOC, and defensive tactics, I believe, is the third one. They're given a set period of time from Bridge, I think might be 6 months or so, that they have to complete it in, because they realize that people are typically doing these functions as secondary employment. We were just fortunate enough that we had 2 of our special officers that were so committed to the town that they had on their own time and completed it.
That's great. Okay. Motion?
I would move to appoint John McKenna as a full-time police officer.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Next, Beta Group to present the sidewalk prioritization plan. Or maybe Mo presenting the
I was going to
sidewalk.
give just a brief introduction.
Okay.
We do have Jack Madden here from Beta Group, our engineer, that conducted a study for us. It was an ADA self-evaluation and a transition plan, and I just want to kind of just explain a little bit about that before we get started. The we're looking at compliance in our sidewalk network, not only ADA but also mobility compliance. People with strollers, walkers, kids on bicycles, just to get around, make Medfield a little bit mobile, more mobile. We're also looking at gaps and connections in our sidewalk network, things that things that don't connect to certain locations in town, and Jack can talk about that. Also, a conditions assessment of our sidewalk network and any improvements that we need to make in our whole network as well. So that was the kind of the background of why we did the study, and I'll give it over to Jack and have him do that presentation. And if you have any questions, we can answer all that at the end, and I'm still here to do some contracts after that.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Mo. Like Mo said, I'm Jack Madden. I'm with Beta Group. You can go to the next slide. We were hired to do an ADA self-evaluation and transition plan for the sidewalk and curb ramps in the town of Medfield. It's a requirement of the Americans with Disabilities Act to conduct a self-evaluation and transition plan. Sidewalks and curb ramps are a piece of that. And our process allows us to do that compliance piece as well as do some sidewalk master planning so that you can understand your pedestrian network better. Next slide, please. So as I go through this presentation, I'll be describing our process to complete the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan, but I'll also be sort of tying it into capital improvement planning and the other initiatives that the town has. Next slide, please. So first of all, our approach is a GIS-centric approach, which means that we can use technology to wrap our arms around where your curb ramps and sidewalks are, what condition they're in, and attach data to the location of these particular linear features and point locations. And we use data analysis to assess the compliance, and then we use that to develop the transition plan, which helps us to identify how much it's going to cost and where the money is going to come from.
So how did you get the sidewalks into the GIS? Were they already there, or did you have to input them?
We did a field assessment. So our process includes, some desktop preparation where we create base mapping for the town, and then we send a field team out, and they walk the town and identify using GIS and tablets and hand measuring tools, the condition, dimensional attributes for the data set, and it's all located in the field. Yes. So we conducted that starting in the fall of 2020. It's about a 6-month process for us to get that data completed. And then, over the past several months, we've been completing the evaluation and then the self-evaluation and transition plan report. Next slide, please. We're currently at the report stage in the a draft report stage. So this slide just shows the range of condition that we saw out in the field. When we are out there, we are measuring widths. We are identifying the material of the sidewalk, and then we're also assessing it in a good, fair, poor range of condition. These are some examples from the town.
In your prior slide, just a quick question, there was a prior slide mentioned prioritization.
Yes.
I just wanted to understand the context of prioritization. I'm assuming part of the prioritization process looks at condition. Does it look at connection? Like, in other words, what are the criteria for prioritizing sidewalks?
I do have some slides that will
Okay, gotta get there.
describe the prioritization process.
Okay.
And
Then just cover it when you get there, that's fine.
yeah. We also identify obstructions in the pedestrian network. So these are some examples of the things we locate where the pedestrian access route is restricted. Sometimes it's vertical elements like utility poles and mailboxes. Sometimes it's maintenance issues like vegetation on the back of the sidewalk, like in that center picture. The surface condition can be a hazard as well as a compliance issue, so we drop a point location on those to identify where those are located. Next slide, please. And overall, town-wide, your sidewalks are mostly asphalt. We collected 66 miles of sidewalks. Most of them are asphalt. You have about 12% concrete, it looks like, and the rest are other materials such as brick. Next slide, please. But overall, your sidewalks are in pretty good shape. The larger slice of the pie there is the fair condition assessment, and only 12% of your sidewalks are in poor condition or need immediate replacement. And that's what we're going to target with our transition plan as far as sidewalks go. We also locate curb ramps and assess them for material and condition as well as compliance. These are some examples of different curb ramps around town and that just happen to be compliant and non-compliant. You can see, some of the different qualities. One of the important things on a compliant ramp is, in addition to the dimensional thresholds and minimums, is the detectable warning panel at the opening of the ramp, and that's what visually impaired people use to identify when they're about to step into a busy roadway. You'll also find those on train platforms and other similar kinds of approaches to dangerous.
So is that what makes the top right one non-compliant, the lack of this?
That one on the top right, it has it's made of brick. There, I think, in addition to the detectable warning panel, it may have not made it for various reasons. It's usually a combination of factors that knocks a ramp out of compliance.
Okay.
We do collect the data on that. It's a little cumbersome to identify the one reason, or a lot of times it's many reasons. Next slide, please. And overall, the compliance assessment for the town was there are 10 compliant curb ramps in the town. Now this we assess to the PROAG standard, which is the most recent and most restrictive standard for curb ramp assessment. That's what the state tests to, and we feel, although it doesn't necessarily mean that the ramp is currently out of compliance, but when you go to replace a ramp, or if you alter the sidewalk, you need to reconstruct it to that standard. So we assess to that standard.
I just want to make a note that we don't only have 10 compliant ramps, but the new standard is only 10, but a lot of ramps were compliant before this new standard came out.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, so when they were built, they most likely met the standard that was current at the time. And so, so it's worse than it looks. But, that's why we conduct a prioritization model. And in the next slide, we show the process here. So what we do is we work with Mo on coming up with the different criteria, which is consistent with the ADA requirements. We locate the schools. That's in the image on the left. We draw a buffer around the schools. That's a quarter mile, which is a typical walking distance. In the center image is your town center. We draw a half mile around that. And then in the picture on the right are other town services, including open space and town hall and other sort of public facilities. And we draw a buffer around those as well. And then in the next slide, we show how, when we combine those, we develop a heat map for where we would expect the most pedestrian activity in the town. So, as you would expect, in town center is where those most important locations of your sidewalk network are located. So when we take that big number of curb ramps and poor condition sidewalks, and we really focus on those areas that are most important, and we start there, we work our way out, we can come up with a transition plan that is implementable over a set number of years.
So on this one, your heat map, is that based on what you would expect, or do you have actual data as the number of pedestrians in those areas?
We do not count. We do not do pedestrian counts. This is a cost-effective way to assess where the pedestrian activity will occur.
So this is just a likely area that,
Yes.
Yep, okay.
This is probably a question for Mo. It sounds like this methodology doesn't really give us insight. We have various people in town that have expressed desires for sidewalk. For instance, the Adams Street connection, and then arguments that we should have sidewalks from the state hospital property at some point in the near future all the way to downtown. It's not really something that would give us insight into knowing which of those requests are the most compelling.
This is kind of an early stage for, first of all, we looked at, it's mostly on compliance first, where
okay.
most of the activity will be.
Okay.
Where it's likely to be in most cities and towns around, schools, playgrounds, parking lots, the center of town, municipal locations where you have activity, is we're trying to get compliance as well as look at the connections that are missing that we would look at to see and prioritize to get to those locations. And then build out from there. For the sidewalk network that you're talking about is different than what we're kind of looking at first.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, compliant. The ADA piece is primarily about the existing facilities that the town has. That's what the requirement for developing the transition plan is. The sidewalk master planning piece is helpful for using the same process. Next slide, please. So this is just a closer look at the town center, and you can see that we're showing sidewalk segments and curb ramp locations. Each sidewalk segment and each curb ramp location is identified with a priority ranking. So when we next slide, when we develop the transition plan, it's an accounting process at that point. We combine the condition assessment, the compliance assessment, and the priority tiers into a table like this, and we can more easily see the numbers that we are talking about. So on that top row, the replace existing, those are the non-compliant ramps. That's our 426 ramp number. Around the schools, you have 100 ramps that are non-compliant. In your town center, you have 71, and so on. That number on tier area D are those ramp locations that are outside of that heat area. And those are your more residential areas where where the priority is the lowest for the ADA purposes. The next row is the potential missing ramps. When we're out in the field, we locate areas, locations where there should be a ramp, where there currently is not a ramp. So that would be at a marked pedestrian crossing. It could be at a roadway crossing where there's a sidewalk on one side and there's a sidewalk on another side, and then there's maybe no marked pedestrian crossing, but also no curb cuts to make the crossing. So these all, the 253 potentially missing ramps are all subject to additional review. These are not necessarily ramp locations that need to be constructed, but that they should be looked at with an engineering an eye. And next time when there's a roadway project in that area, you might consider adding ramps at those locations. So when we combine these, we actually come up with the bottom line there, which is that 679 number. But you also notice that in the tier area D is where you'll find most of those ramps. That's the lower priority, mostly residential streets, which have low volumes of traffic, low speeds, and maybe, as far as ADA is concerned, maybe a less critical candidate for replacement. Next slide.
So before you go, can you go back?
Sure.
The only question I have on the 426 of the total replace existing, when you had the pie chart up before,
Yes.
that showed 10%, only 10% were compliant, made the point that this is the current standard, and you would only have to replace. You would come to that standard the next time you have to replace the crossings.
Yes.
Do we know out of those 426 that this chart is saying need to be replaced, how many of them are so bad they're not even compliant to the old standard and need to be replaced, versus these are the things you'll replace when you have to actually get around to replacing them? Is there, that looks like a big number, but I don't think it is a big number.
We could develop that list.
Okay.
I don't have that list prepared for this presentation, but that could be a list that we prepare for the town, and I can work with Mo to identify those.
Seems like you'd need to know that before you can take action on this list. See what I'm saying? There's only so that pie chart showed only 10% are compliant. Now, if I just happen to say, well, let's assume it's only that 10% that are compliant.
So you're saying the condition of the ramp versus they're still non-compliant in today's
Against the brand new standard,
right,
but I
in
thought you
today's
said, but you
standards.
don't have to do anything about that until you get to the point where you're replacing the.
Well, you would want to still look into replacing those curb ramps as soon as you are able to. It's not mandatory, but we would want everything to be in compliance, and but there are ramps that are in worse shape or non-existing that we would want to look at first. So I know what you're saying is the condition, we should be looking at those as a priority versus just changing something that looks pretty good, but it's not compliant yet.
Yeah, my real question is, how many of those 426
Right.
ramps are in worse shape?
Like I said, we can look at that and develop a list of that. Yeah. I do want to make a point too that with all these curb ramps and sidewalks and things, this is in conjunction with our Complete Streets program as well as our pavement management program. So these will all be looked at in those phases as well, and looking for grant monies to do that. So it's, when Jack will go a little bit further and talk about how many we plan to, try to do each year, but that number is going to be low on the low side. It's a minimum, not what we can do with those different programs.
Thanks.
Yeah, next slide, please. So that 679 number that we were just looking at, that's a very large number. And when you speak of it in terms of the cost associated with replacing ramps and sidewalks. So, you know, we talk about what the town can do using local funds on an annual basis. And the town's identified a budget of $150,000 to replace poor condition sidewalks and remediate non-compliant curb ramps. And so what we're showing here is a potential scenario using that $150,000, and we give curb ramps the $48,000 and sidewalks this $102,000. It might be more or less some years than others, but is there another? Yes. Okay. So with this $150,000 a year, we can target perhaps 10 curb ramps a year and maybe about a half a mile of sidewalks at a time. So when we build that out over a 10-year period, we can start to work down that backlog. So next slide, please.
Another question for Mo. That half mile of sidewalks a year, so intuitively, I'm guessing there's an assumption about asphalt versus concrete there?
Right. That's something that we discuss. Usually we use concrete around the center of town, around certain school areas. Asphalt is cheaper to do, but you know, we're open to look at different areas of town and kind of discuss.
So that number is some assumed mix of the two kinds.
Right,
Okay.
and again, that's a baseline. It's again with the complete streets and the pavement management. We're also looking at, you know, when we do something over, that those ramps and those sidewalks will be encompassed in certain projects.
Mo, what's the cost differential, asphalt to concrete?
I would say that, you know, if you're looking at a mile of sidewalk for concrete, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $800,000.
Well, yes. The number we use is a little lower than that, but you know, it's about a 50% more to build concrete sidewalks than asphalt
Okay,
sidewalks.
all right, thank you.
That's what we found.
Yep.
So this is a 10-year look at that sidewalk number, and it's about 1.2 million worth of funding going towards sidewalks to get about 4.5 miles to replace about half of that 8 miles of sidewalk over 10 years. And in the next slide, I show the curb ramps. We can get about 100 curb ramps completed over a 10-year period. If you go to the next slide. So we just showed the sort of budget breakdown for using the local funds, but there are other ways to fund sidewalks improvements. And Mo mentioned in the pavement management plan using Chapter 90 funds. You know, when you're milling and overlaying a roadway, it's most efficient to look at your sidewalks at that point and try to also complete some curb ramps with the same project under the same contract. Your complete streets status will, there will be some overlap with the ADA compliance and those projects. That's potentially $400,000 over a 3-year period. There's an annual municipal state ADA grant that contributes up to $250,000 for projects. And so from one year to the next, there may be additional funds put into the sidewalk effort, including state TIP funding, which there may be a state TIP project that comes through and knocks out a bunch of those too. So however you pay for it, you'll be able to take credit for it. And as you work down that backlog and that number goes down, then you're completing the compliant piece of the ADA transition plan.
Is there a target, when you said take credit for it, that tells me, is there a target or a requirement that we're?
Well, ultimately, you want to remediate all the non-compliant items.
Right.
And really, to be fair, and this is an effort that every town has to go through, and you know, Medfield's really in no worse or better shape than other towns in the region. You know, this is a good faith effort. It's protecting the town from the liability of taking no action. And so you're showing that effort, and you're identifying these obstacles. You're making a plan to remediate them, and that puts the town in a little bit less exposed position.
But it does sound like you're saying there's a hammer there as well, that if we're not ADA compliant, the federal government can come down on us or something, or?
This is true. It really, we've worked with towns at Beta where we do many of these ADA transition plans, but we've done a couple of these similar efforts for towns that are under court order to do it, and that's a different situation where they have the Department of Justice looking at them more closely and monitoring their progress. If the town is undergoing an ADA transition plan process for their sidewalks and curb ramps, that's not a likely scenario to play out. It's just not typical. Next slide. So, you know, we talked earlier about how we can use these other initiatives, including Complete Streets. You know, these are projects that the town is currently considering for applying for funds. This is just one example down by Meeting House Pond on Ferry Street, making a connection under the rail line. The next slide, please. And this is in the similar area, and just we identified these gaps in our gap assessment down along Meeting House Pond also, just to make the connection in an area that seems to have a lot of interest and pedestrian activity. Next slide, please. And also using the same tool and using the same GIS-based analysis, we can identify locations where utility companies may be responsible for removing their equipment. This is an example of where they've replaced a pole, and they have that other pole that eventually they'll remove. But you know, it's just something that is not really on the town to do, but it's good for the town to be able to understand what's going on their sidewalk network. Next slide, please. So, you know, when we consider all these different initiatives, we can achieve the goals that the town has for its sidewalk network, and also just use our limited funds most efficiently. And that's really all I have tonight. Be happy to answer any other questions if anyone has questions.
No, this was very helpful, because there's a lot of discussion around town about, you know, why certain sidewalks are the way they are, and it's intriguing to see how you've tagged these. I know I walk Miller Street, and that street you showed that has cracks and it's elevated, and it's just a accident waiting to happen. So when some of those get cleaned up, I'll be very happy.
No questions. Thank you for coming.
I appreciate the presentation. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have Mo back again with 3 contracts.
So, 2 of these contracts are from our capital planning. They're 2 vehicle contracts. They're both they're both on the lot right now. That's why we're trying to act fast and trying to get them, instead of waiting 2 or 3 years on some of the vehicles that we've been waiting for. So both of them are, one's an F600 and one of them is an F350. Like I said, they're both available, and they both were approved at last year's capital.
Can I ask a quick question? Yeah, are the dealers these days putting protection on the catalytic converters? Because I have to believe these are the trucks that get targeted.
I'm not sure if they put any protection. They make it a little more difficult to get, but if someone wants it, they're going to get it.
Well, I've seen that they have, like, there are now devices, and I didn't know if these guys would do this, just knowing it's going to a town, that it's like, it's a pretty good sized bracket, so whereas the other ones, it's a quick snip, and it drops out and you've got it, it's a tough plate to not only cut, but then you've got to go underneath and do more work. So you're not going to take the time to do it.
They haven't
No.
put that as an option.
Okay.
You apparently can paint them too, to make them,
You can what?
you can paint them actually. I was surprised that the paint wouldn't just burn off, but you can paint them, you know, property of the town of Medfield, so that when they go to sell them, it's less likely they're gonna find a buyer. Well, none of those people are probably care about legalities.
Questions about the two vehicles?
No,
There's no chance of these being electric vehicles.
Not yet.
Yeah, okay.
The technology, and we talk about this all the time, the technology for the smaller, smaller trucks and vehicles, mine's up for capital actually this year. We were looking at
Yeah, I saw that.
an F-150 Lightning, which is all electric.
Yep.
Our facilities department is also looking at that one. As you get into the larger, heavier duty trucks that we need for plowing and certain activities in our jobs, the technology isn't there yet, but it's getting there, and as soon as that happens, we will definitely be
It's interesting because
discussing.
they're doing it with the semis, so that people are developing it for that, but not for the dump truck sized dump trucks yet, apparently. So, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I guess can we approve both of those at the same time, Mark? Both vehicle, or do them one at a time?
You can do one motion that references both of them.
Yeah, so what, have a motion to reference
I would move
both?
to approve the request to sign the contracts for the MHQ for the new Ford F-350 for $62,755, and with MHQ for a new Ford F-600 for $86,868.
second?
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries for those two.
The last contract, unfortunately, our engineering company sent us FY22's proposal, so the price has changed. It's for FY23. The contract was made under the assumption of the FY22 proposal that they had sent. So they did send another one today, but we're gonna push that off to the next selectmen's meeting. But it is for our annual landfill monitoring that we do every year. The price has gone up from $36,500 to $38,200. So
So the scope of work from last year is exactly the same?
it's exactly the same. The prices have gone up, and the $38,200 would be the new price in the next contract.
And this isn't the consultant that we need to be able to evaluate the landfill so that we can put solar on top
No,
of it?
this is just our
So
landfill monitoring.
Yeah, and the consultant that we approved in the capital budget last year, that's an environmental to work with DEP to get to the point to where we're closure. We're not at the point where we can design anything or talk about the feasibility on the landfill until we actually get the landfill closed out.
Okay. So
That's
this
the
is the
first
old
step.
landfill.
The old landfill,
Okay.
but the first step is we're working with DEP to get the actual landfill officially
Do we have
closed.
some sort of concept of the time horizon as to how long it's gonna take, how much money it's gonna cost us?
I do not.
The scope for this, I actually read, besides picking up on the date wrong, I did read what it talked about, and there was a place in there, it said, well, if in our monitoring, we determine that we either monitor, we need to adjust the well, how we're monitoring based on our readings, we'll do that, which, when I read it, I was thinking, well, certainly if you uncover a problem, then you're gonna increase the monitoring, but if you, over time, presumably the problem starts to go away, you would decrease the monitoring. Is this like an eternal obligation until we get the landfill closed out, or is it a 10-year thing?
It will be, yeah, all landfills are under monitoring all the time. So ours, they look for the 1,4-dioxane that they have for, it's a secondary contaminant, but, so they look for that. They look for different monitoring wells, gas, or,
I guess what I'm asking is this a site that, effectively, you're monitoring something that for all intents and purposes emits whatever it emits on a fairly routine, steady rate for, a long time. Mark?
So actually, you need to put this in historical context. This landfill was actually capped, and we just didn't get the final sign-off from DEP back when. So it's somewhat protected as long as nobody disturbs anything up there. So it's the whole key with landfill capping, correct me if I'm wrong, is to minimize surface water going down. You want to keep it dry down there. And that stabilizes everything, as opposed to having water go down through there and then it would leach down through.
Yeah, I get that. I guess what I'm trying to picture in my head is, on one hand, we're hiring an environmental consultant to help us get the state to close it out. On the other hand, the monitoring sounds like it's a never-changing condition, and I'm trying to figure out, well, at what point does the state say, well, even though it's cost you $38,000 a year to monitor this, we'll get to a certain point that we'll just say, never mind.
Well, the stuff that's down there also is a possibility of migrating and interacting, and it's giving off methane gas.
All
I think
of
that- I
which
think
says,
that-
I don't see how we're ever gonna get.
I think the simpler answer is, until we get that final closeout, we won't know how long we're obligated to monitor, because we don't have that final closeout from DEP. So that part of how long that long-term monitoring will be part of that closeout.
But every landfill in the Commonwealth is under the same monitoring rules that we are.
Yeah, I'm
For the
sure.
landfills.
I'm just picturing, I'm trying to picture what the end game looks like.
I
And
don't know if there is.
I don't think we know the
I don't
answer to
think-
that yet.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a.
Yeah.
We're
an
we're
end date.
basically paying for the fact that 50 years ago, our residents threw all their trash there, and now we're having to monitor
Well,
the
sure,
effects of that,
sure,
so.
but right now, we also seem to be in a regulatory regime that just says, well, you're just gonna keep doing this until we meander our way to somebody at the state that says, oh, you don't have to do it, or you have to do it for 20 more years, and then, I mean, we wanna use this site for solar if we can.
You'd
It's
still
not
be able
much
to, I
good for
believe you'd
anything
still
else.
be able to use it for activities, but the monitoring would still take place because of what's underneath the ground. Because there is a membrane across the whole top that
Okay, so
prevents from, surface water getting down there.
so it could be a permanent monitoring requirement.
Things are still deteriorating or decomposing underneath in those landfills.
Should be glad the price didn't go up more. It sounds like a monopoly kind of thing. Okay. So that's deferred. We'll pick that up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Rick Fink to discuss his proposal for our park naming contest for the park between Brothers Marketplace and Medfield Public Library. Welcome, Rick.
Hi, thanks for having me. Frank, you're doing a great job. So while pursuing the permit to host the event for Medfield students in the park adjacent to the public library for next Wednesday, I uncovered something that I now want to explore. This park doesn't have an official name. So in my 11 years living in Medfield, I've heard it unofficially called Gazebo Park, or simply referred to as the park between the library and the Brothers Market parking lot with a gazebo in it. I'm also aware that some know this parcel of land as Selectmen's Park. No offense, but that's a terrible name for a park. I think these are three lousy names, so we should come up with something that's a better name for something that's in such a prominent location in our town. So here's my idea. I think we should let the kids decide a name. Why? Well, two reasons. First, kids are a large part of the Medfield community spirit. And second, and most importantly, kids do not have an agenda. In a time where divisive arguing has plagued this community, maybe we should step aside and let the kids have some public input. So here's how I propose we find a proper name for this park. It's 5 steps. 1, we promote a naming contest to be kicked off at our pizza party at that park next week. 2, to give all kids an opportunity to vote and to promote civic engagement, ballots can be obtained and submitted at the library or town hall for 1 week through Wednesday, November 30. These ballots will ask for the child's name, grade, and a short explanation for their name suggestion. So it's both qualitative and quantitative. 3, a 5-member committee will evaluate the entries and choose the most popular and best supported name recommendations to be included on the final ballot. Number 4, final ballots can also be obtained and submitted at the library or town hall during a time frame to be scheduled later. And finally, the official new name will then be announced in a ceremony to be held during another pizza party at the park. I like pizza, I'm sorry. Sometime in the spring. A plaque dedicating the new name of the park could be unveiled and serve as a symbol of community spirit and the value we place on our children. I hope that we can come to an agreement. That's where I'm at right now.
How did we come up with straw hat? How did that one come about?
Similar, I think it was a public.
There was a public voting for it.
Gene ran a contest.
Yep.
I mean, I think what I really liked about it when I got your email, was it yesterday or today, that you're asking the kids to explain why, right? Otherwise, it might just become something silly, and it, it shouldn't. It should be taken seriously. That, if I'm not mistaken, that used to be where the old St. Edward's Church was, right? Which was a beautiful structure that unfortunately got torn down, and that's what created that space. So there's some history there. So I think it's great to see what the kids will come up with. And the committee you suggested, I think, has a lot of, especially with Richard DeSorg on there, there's a lot of history there, and I like the idea.
I think it's a cool idea. I like it. Do you know what the British came up with for the name of the boat when they let everybody vote on that?
Putting me on the spot.
Boatface,
Oh yeah, Bodie McBoatface. Yep.
We won't name it
which
that.
is
We're
not a
good.
bad name, so.
Well, see, going back to the kids have to justify calling it something as silly as that. Yeah.
Personally, I'm optimistic that the young adults in our town will find great merit in the historic institution of the selectmen.
You're right.
So do we need to actually officially approve? I guess we can officially endorse this. So if, I think everybody is good. Any comments from the public, one way or the other?
You have to agree you're gonna change it if they come up with it.
Well, we haven't
Reserve
talked
that
about
right
we
first.
haven't talked about how long we'll stick with it.
Is the committee to study memorials?
Yeah, so I
Paul?
think,
No.
I think the recommendation from Richard DeSorga was that this would be, this may go beyond your concept for simply getting to the name, but I think, I saw the email, you might
So
explain.
typically, when we name a park or a street or any of that, it goes through the committee to study memorials. So in speaking to Richard today, because I wanted to make sure last night, as I was thinking about this literally at 3 a.m., was that we weren't renaming a park that already had a name that I just couldn't remember. So Richard did confirm that there is no name, and suggested that once the kids come up with a name and you recommend it to the Board of Selectmen, that they just refer that to the committee to study memorials, and that we go from there.
Okay.
And I think he actually talked about, did he back off the town meeting type
I
stuff?
did.
You did? Okay,
Good.
all right, that's fine. It's a fun park, so
Yeah.
we could use a fun
Exactly,
process. Yes,
exactly.
okay, I got it.
Just a
Oops.
quick
Yes,
question. Chris Potts, if these are minors that are filling out do they need to have a parent sign off on it, permission, or for?
Well, it's not giving any
Only if
information,
they
right?
want to name it after themselves.
No, but to actually submit for privacy reasons. I don't know whether, I don't know.
I would defer to
The only
council
reason
on
why
that.
I'd ask for their name and their grade is just to justify that they're a real person and there's not duplicate votes.
I wouldn't think so.
I can't sneak one in.
No.
My dog can't sneak one in.
Can't be Selectmen's Park.
Yeah, well, it could be Murph's. I'm good.
Good?
Yeah, I
Motion?
think it's great.
Oh, you want a motion?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Rick.
All right,
you,
let's hope
guys.
Mother Nature
Take it away.
cooperates with you next Wednesday.
Yeah. All right. Next item is the Medfield Energy Committee to discuss potential FY 2024 budget requests and discussion of fees for electric charging station on Janes Avenue and potential vote. Oh, and is Mo already gone? So we had one question from Nate Bazinet. Mo, since the town took possession of the utility poles by a town meeting a few years ago, would the town have to pay to replace them? I think the short answer is we never took possession of the
Yeah.
utility poles.
Just
We
the
only
street
bought
lights.
the
Fixed it.
lights.
Yeah.
And yes, we
lights.
are responsible for maintenance on the lights, which was the one argument against buying the lights. We don't own the poles.
Correct.
I'll cover the first one on the budget. Paul Fetchlick, I've been on the Energy Committee 8 years now, something like that. So if you can go to the next one, whoever's driving. All right, so this is no votes, more 3 goals. Awareness of what we're thinking in terms of what we're advocating. 2 is, get guidance from you on how to proceed forward, with the 3rd bullet of, conceptual support of what we're thinking. So we don't have detailed numbers for everything, and I'll explain why in just a bit. But really, it's around FY24 operating budget, some suggestions, and then the 5-year capital plan, but really sort of things in 2024 that we'd be looking at. So, all right, if you can go to the next one. All right, start with the operating budget. These are 3 things that we are advocating for in descending order of priority. So the first one is Susan McPhee's current role, right? Really around energy conservation, energy management. So assuming same hours as last year, roughly half-time equivalent, with a bump in inflation that's around $34,000, give or take a bit. The second one is more defined amount of money, small, albeit, for programmatic outreach for some of the things we're doing, rather than going and tin cupping $200 here, $300 there, $400 there, $50 there. So it's a small amount. And then the final thing is we're teeing it up more for discussion to get the dialogue going, is around the sustainability coordinator role. So if you can go back one. So the thought was there's been discussion on what it would look like and what sort of the job role might be. So we just put in a placeholder that for here is, looking at other towns like Winchester and so forth, it's 3/4 of a person to a full person. So if we figure Susan's about a half a person and we started with 3/4 of a person, that's how we came up with a $50,000. So it's 34K times 1.5, just to ballpark it. So if you go to the next one, and you can look at this later. This is sort of Susan's description of her role, of what she does. So it's really focused on town properties, town-owned assets, and so forth, and really on energy conservation. So in a nutshell, it's looking for grants that are focused on that. All right, so it's pretty well defined. She's been doing it, I think, for 3 years now, or two, something like that.
We're still in our first contract.
Yeah. So that just sort of sets what she does. And if you go to the next one is, the new role, and we're open to feedback on this, but we thought somebody had to start with something. So we took a mix of looking at Winchester's sustainability coordinator, what we had in Tomcat, sort of melding them together in a melting pot, and came up with this as a starting point. So if you can look, it's broader than just town properties. There's a lot of outreach. It's more on sustainability, but it's also citizenry versus just the building and reducing energy consumption. So you can read through it and think about it and come back. But that's our starting shot, salvo, for it.
We're looking for quick reactions, I assume? Or-
Yeah, we'll take any if you have quick.
Anything, Eileen?
Well, based on the conversation we had, I want to say 2 meetings ago, when we talked about our goals. I know this came up, and I know, Hilly, you mentioned it. And I just think the only thing that we're challenged with right now, and I did like the way it was under his contract, so it's not a full-time employee
That's a good idea,
on a burden for the town, because as we were discussing 2 meetings ago, where there are a lot of departments, I know, Christine, that you've said people trying to add, and we're struggling with how many bodies we can add. So I like the detail that you've put in, so we can wrap our head around. And I didn't read it all; I'd be lying if I said I did.
Not meant to, yeah.
But I think you're giving us a feel for what the individual would be assigned to do, and then letting us sort it out with does it make sense? Is it too much of a reach? Is it too high level? Is it again, not having
Opening salvo.
Yeah,
That's
perfect.
the whole point of this, right?
Thank you.
And the idea was also, there was some discussion last time, are they the same role or are they different? So we also tried, that's why I included the existing role for Susan in there, so you can get a distinction between the two of
Great.
them. So those are sort of the ideas for the operating budget.
So I heard this discussed at the Energy Committee, and I'm in favor of it. I like the idea of having a sustainability coordinator. I think it's going to come down, of course, to the money. Where do we get the money for it? we are gonna be getting more money from the community choice aggregation, because that is structured in a way where there is money that comes into the town from that, so that that could maybe support this type of thing.
Not sure, I don't think that's the case. Well, how is money coming into the town?
Yeah, I think there's gonna be some overhead that.
We said we wouldn't do that. Well, are you talking about this? There was a surcharge that we discussed on that committee, but we elected not to do that in the interest of promoting it. So I don't know if there's another provision for an overhead surcharge. I missed it.
The other thing is, independent of that surcharge or not, there's the timing of this. There's, you need that in place, which means state approval, out to bid, implement to get the money coming back in. So, I mean, realistically, I don't think it's a 2024. Even if we had access to the spigot, that we could start the money to flow back anyway.
I promoted Megan since
Okay.
she's on the CCA with you.
Megan, the question came up, or the point was made, that through the community choice aggregation, there's some money that comes into the town, and the only money that I recall that we discussed was if we were to put, I forget what the number was, where there was a 1/2 cent additional charge per kilowatt hour, or some 0.2 cents additional per kilowatt hour, that would come to the town. But I believe our discussions are that we would not do that. But there might be something else that I just haven't picked up on.
I think we left it as it is an option for us, but we did not make a final decision about it. But I think it is still an option and is included in our plan as an option.
Okay. So at least we have, at the very least, Megan and I agree that we haven't made a decision on it. My recollection on that, Megan, was that we recognized it was an option. We kept it in the plan. I thought we talked about when we first launched this thing, we wouldn't do that because we don't have any interest in having the price be higher than it needs to be. I agree that we did not rule it out permanently as something we could do. So that could be just a difference between how I remember the conversation and how Megan did. So that's.
It was always one of the benefits of doing the community choice aggregation was to get this extra money to pay for some of these roles that we didn't have in town.
And that'll probably depend on how good a deal it is for people to.
The other thing
Got
to
it.
consider on this too is, part of this is finding grant money. So you don't know what you're gonna get for grants until you sort of start having somebody look for them, and then there's a timing question. So that may do some offsets on this as well. Timing's still TBD.
Any other comments, Pete?
No, that's it.
I had a couple. First off, going all the way back to Susan McPhee, and Christine, you can correct me if my impressions are wrong. I think Susan has proven to be a very good resource for us to put on. I can't remember, for some reason I had in my head that it was $25,000 a year, but that might have been the first year, so
We have a not to exceed $20,000 fee in her contract, I believe.
not to exceed what?
$20,000
Per year?
per year.
So I just didn't understand the 34,000 as just being an
Well,
inflation.
I went back and whether actually, she came in and what her actual billings were, so I ran with that, and I think I boosted by 5% for inflation, but, it's in that low 30 range, so.
So she's built.
I will determine that she has not exceeded her contract then.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'm only doing, that's a math check. That's not an argument against Susan McPhee
No.
being
No,
worthwhile.
it's
I just try to
fantastic.
understand what you pointed out. So, for sure, and beyond the fact that I think it's, even if it were some number that you'd come up with, my sense is her advice over the past year has been well worth it. My perception is that has been balanced, economically balanced, and practically balanced, technically balanced, which was the thing I was worried about at the start, is that it wouldn't be, but I think it has been. So my comfort with her really adding value has gone up a lot.
She's made us
around
money.
that. If we went to, first off, I think I'm still, from an operating budget standpoint, in the near future, I am pessimistic about what the economic outlook is going to be like for the entire country in the coming years. So I think it would be prudent for us not to be adding staff, but you're talking about a contract. The one issue, if we get to the point where we're really looking at bringing somebody on, even as a contractor, is the last time, several years ago, we had the opportunity, we had a federal grant to bring on an energy coordinator, and it was all paid for by the federal government, so it was easy to do. The cost of paying for that person for a couple of years was well covered by the savings that came in from the low-hanging fruit that was generated. Whether that would have been a sustainable role for that person to continually always be more than paying for their cost on an ongoing basis is the question. And so in my head, after that experience, I've always said, first off, it was a good thing to do. We wound up better off for having done it than not having done it. But making a decision about a long-term, even if we contract for this, I think this is sort of a long-term strategic decision about, yes, we need someone to do something. When we get there, I would advise or, like to see us having thought about the definition of that job, that's one that we are highly confident will be able to deliver value to the town with a scope of, a job description that actually gets us past what might be low-hanging fruit at the start. And that, I don't know whether that morphs into more of a, facilities role where not only are we bringing in the new stuff, but we're figuring out smarter ways to maintain it, and we're making sure people know it. I don't know, but when we get there, that's, I think, where my head will be at, is this really defining a job that is going to make sense for 10 years, not simply for 3 years? So it's just, in the same way, this is early, that's early going back. And then the last point around the communications and that kind of stuff, the only question I would have on that is, we already have a Sustainable Medfield group. It's a private group, but I think it's been doing a nice job of education. We have a Medfield Environmental Action Group, which is also a private group, which there's a lot of shared membership here. But it's also a private group that's doing an awful lot. And so the idea that we need to bring somebody in-house to educate and communicate, when we get to that bridge, I would kind of want to understand what it is that our other private groups that are already doing what I think is a pretty good job, why we need somebody in the house to do even more of it. So again, it's when we get there, but those would be my thoughts.
Do you have a comment?
I think the role will probably change over the years. We're all aware that there's a lot of money coming down the pike, in the next few years, 5 years or 10 years. And I think it is really important that Medfield gets the foot in the door there to apply for those grants, because every town around us is getting a sustainability director with that specific task. And, we just need to go and swim with a fish and really apply for all those grants. There's a lot of money.
I want to make sure we're not just Pavlov's dog, just because every other town is doing something because there's federal money doesn't automatically get me to the point that it's a smart thing to do.
Right, but I mean, I don't know if we have the capacity to develop all the projects that could be funded and apply for all those grants. And I think that would really shortchange the town if we didn't do that. It's a lot of money. If you look at it, it's a lot of money.
Again, I don't like being Pavlovian when it comes to going after money just because the money's there. Really all I'm asking for is that when we get to whatever it is we want to do, there has to be a business case behind it, and what it is we're trying to do actually has to make sense for the town. It's not just enough to know that the federal government or the state government is going to bribe us to do something that the federal government or the state government thinks we need to do, just because. So that's, it's not, I like federal money to help us do the things we want to do. I just want to make sure we're not just doing something because every other town is chasing the same trough of money that we think we should chase. Kind of like to know it makes sense. It's a discipline around.
No, but I don't think that's the case. I mean, there are things that we want to do and need to do, and Susan has proven the point, and helping to catch up some of the delayed maintenance. Deferred maintenance.
So all those kinds of arguments will get a lot of traction.
Right, and vehicle replacements and all these things could be boiler replacements. Those things can definitely.
Those kind of arguments will carry a lot of weight with me for it, certainly.
Yeah. So in the spirit of awareness, I mean, take a look at this, and we tried to scope out what's there, and then, come back and say,
You have this?
disagree, there's,
Do you have this?
I don't think, there's nothing you mentioned here that
I just gotta
sounds
say.
like way out of whack. It's a bad, it's tentative, sure, but
yeah.
the directions you're thinking about, to me, sure sound like they're good directions to
Right.
think through. And again, what I've seen is what's happened just in the past couple of years that's headed us in this direction. I've actually been pleased with what I've seen, so.
No,
so
and
it's-
Hillia, I respect you that 2030 is the stake in the ground with the government, and then as we continue to move towards 2050. So it's certainly a warm body that there's more coming at them than less, right? But I was sitting here thinking, I wonder if there's a body in your structure right now that as the world moves forward, their need may not be as strong. So could you redirect energies to help?
Not
with
right
it?
now, no.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing to consider is other towns, 3/4 full-time person-ish, is can you dip your toe in with a contractor at, what's the minimum entry, quarter or less than a quarter, so you can also.
Yeah.
Something to
Makes
consider.
sense.
All right, so those are the operating. If you can jump ahead just one, I'll tee this up really quick. So as far as capital goes, this is multiple moving pieces, all right? So you won't see firm plans here, you'll see more concepts than anything else. So the kind of projects we're looking at are really related to energy efficiency or some kind of sustainability goals, all right? So, when we talk about timing, we got a lot of moving pieces, like solar on the roof needs a roof that's gonna last for 20 years. So it's sort of, it's hard until you get the end point to back up. The old landfill for solar, another one. You don't know the schedule, so you can't do that. So a lot of contingencies in here. So 3 classes. One is, for doing building improvements, swap out a hot water system at a school somewhere in FY 26 or 7. So there's 2 kinds of capital that could go in here. The first is, if you think about it, if it's FY 27 as an example, you should start looking at doing feasibility work 2 years ahead, probably, because you need that feasibility work to get in queue for grant monies that makes the economics when you actually do it better. So we typically go, oh, God, there's a boiler replacement in February, I'm going to start my engineering work in December, and you sort of blow through that opportunity to do any kind of grant work on that. So I can't tell you what projects are there because the capital improvement plan's in flux, the 5-year plan's in flux as well. So just keep that in mind. And then if it does make sense and it costs more upfront in terms of capital to get a good payback, to your point, if the business case pencils out, it's not like you add a new line item, you might boost an existing line item if the numbers work out. So I can't tell you what they are yet, but that's something we're looking at.
So just so I understand what you said about the capital being in flux, I think what you're basically saying is that the target, we have a capital plan that's not, I don't know what in flux means, because it seems like we've had a capital plan that's a lot less in flux than it's been in the past, let me put it that way. So if I heard you right, what this sounds like is you would be looking at capital projects that are 2 years down the
2 or 3
road.
years out, and so we should do some design feasibility stuff
Right.
maybe today.
And is there a reason why that can't happen?
Again, it actually is not going to appear in the capital improvement plan. It's going to appear in the municipal building stabilization plan.
Oh, yeah, okay. But what I'm getting at is, to your point, in terms of literally finding targets to think about,
Yeah.
you can find them in the municipal building
Yeah, and if I-
stabilization plan.
Yeah, if I wasn't mistaken, though, I think there's money in the budget to redo that stabilization plan.
Yep.
So that's where I said it's potentially shifting.
But we'll
Yeah,
probably always have money.
We need an update to the plan.
So
So
we
we-
literally, this
You're
is the
literally
plan
updating
from
the
way
plan.
back. or
Jerry
not way
McCarty's
back.
plan.
Yeah.
We'll be doing an update of that plan this year.
Okay. So, okay. That's
Yeah,
not
so
fair
we're
enough.
just gonna have to
Got it.
stay close and then,
Yeah.
identify things.
Yeah, and that original plan that we did not look at energy efficiencies or energy improvements at the time, and that was part of the discussion we had with the capital budget committee last year, is the update to this plan needs to take that into
Yeah,
consideration,
yeah,
which
okay.
will then inform a lot of what those
Okay.
new projects will be.
And to your point, I know that Susan is already sort of walking some of the
Yeah.
boilers and heaters that are, towards that end of their lifespan
Yeah.
Right,
project, so we
right.
don't have a failure.
Okay. So you have targets of opportunity right now.
Well, it's
And
also
ultimately we'll be
because
able-
she, I mean, like Paul said, you know, she needs to be able to make a plan 2 years ahead, which projects fit
Right.
a particular footprint
Yeah.
to go into a grant proposal.
Okay. But
So the EVs are no-brainers, you know, Mo's done a good job, but we'll stay in front of those, trying to, whatever comes into plan to make them EV if possible. And then the final one is solar, and I know there's a discussion about PPAs versus buy it, own it, run it. So the point is that our default today is sort of PPA via select, right?
Mhm.
So there is the potential to say, I'll pick the old landfill as an example, right? Is it worth looking at taking that, spending any kind of engineering feasibility money to look at paying for it and owning it, all right? And at least looking at the economics, or doing design work to do a competitive bid that's not a PPA versus select, right? So if the stated direction is we're only gonna do PPAs and they're only gonna be through the select process, then those two items sort of drop off, if I'm clear on that,
Mhm.
right? So, and you can't really look at the economics of the landfill, right? Until, you know, I will bet you 6 months from now, price of electricity is gonna be different, price of materials is gonna be different, capital costs are different, so you really.
And we don't know at this point if there'll be additional costs for us to do that official closure.
Yeah.
I think I'd be a little too optimistic to say that there won't be some sort of cost for that.
Yeah, so I mean, it would, a typical, these are ballpark, you know, to do sort of a feasibility design study might be $30,000 to $40,000, order of magnitude, something like that.
why wouldn't you just, if you were ready to do, let's stick with the landfill for a minute, let's assume it's closed and everything, why wouldn't you just get 2 bids? When you're ready to do it,
Well,
go to the PPA.
Select has their design standard alternative. You could go out to a competitive bid if somebody else said.
No, I
they
don't
want
mean 2
Select
PPA
design.
bids. I mean, go to Select for a PPA bid and go to a installation company for a straight out sale. You've got 2 bids, you do the economic analysis then. Because the issue is really gonna be, the real challenge isn't, I don't think the economic analysis at the point that you're ready to go. The real challenge is having a handle on what the maintenance costs are that you're assuming. It's the same issue we had when we bought the streetlights. Mike Sullivan at the time said, don't buy the streetlights. It looks really good right now because you get them for, $1 a light or something like that. But you're picking up the long-term maintenance,
Replacement.
so you're now getting yourself into the streetlight business, and you don't really know what it's going to cost to maintain streetlights. So far, it looks like that was a really good decision that we made, because we haven't replaced any streetlights to my knowledge. Or if
We
we have
have one to replace.
one. So it wasn't a bad decision there, but we would need to have a handle around what the maintenance, probably full cycle, acquiring, maintaining, disposing of. My guess is by the time we all get around to having lots and lots of solar panels, there'll be disposal costs that are associated with them.
Yeah. So if you go, so point taken, if you go to the next one, I think it may be somewhat of a moot point. So I did sort of say, we did a prioritization of the available sites for solar,
Mhm.
right? Sort of did big space, you'll see a lot of the schools' roof is TBD, because there isn't a target to put rooftop solar on, with the exception of, a quarter of Blake, something like that, right? The landfill should be TBD and about 58-point font. So if you look at it, the ones that are in play are PPA versus select. That's where we're pushing forward to get an LOI signed with them on that. And there's a sense of urgency is capital costs are high. I think the high school parking lot was almost $2 million of cost to build out, because you're doing steel girders and grading, so it's capital intensive. And Mike LaFrancesca said, I think there's electric rates are going up 64% next year. Could be $300,000 more for electricity for the schools, something like that. So there's a sense of urgency on that. So for the most part, if you look at the sites that are likely targets, they're all PPA driven today anyway. So, And that's why I brought it up on the preceding one. It's something to consider in the future, but it's not really,
Yeah.
it's not a
It-
2024 kind of.
Right
Discussion.
now, the recommendation for MEC is to go the PPA route in the
For these
immediate,
priorities, yeah.
short to medium term.
Yeah.
But at some point, there will be certain, I'm speaking as somebody who paid for my own solar panels on my roof, so I'm not
Yeah.
I didn't go the PPA route, but I kind of know that you better have a plan for where you're going to get the money for it, to pay for it, so that's an issue. But that kind of a consideration would be as we look farther downstream,
Yeah.
we can be more thoughtful about
Yeah, and
that.
the target's the landfill, wherever, whenever that happens, that's big enough to look at, because I think that's 3 or 4 times the size of the high school parking lot.
Mhm.
It's huge, so, it's big enough that it might be worth looking at economics on that.
Right.
And then the Council on Aging is on there. There are other non-sort of financial issues of looking at their small, and there's some issues like canopies aren't a good option because they have memorial trees in the parking lot, and you don't want to take them down, kind of thing.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
for the most part, it's the next wave schools, and that's PPA. That's about it, of just what we're
Right.
thinking and sort of engage in the process, and then any guidance on where to go next or who to engage next after this, other than work with the departments on EVs. I think solar's sort of off the table, at least for now, other than driving the LOI at the schools. And then, engaging on the stabilization fund to find those end date targets.
Of course, the Energy Committee is in support of getting some of the dependencies, the landfill sorted out, and, everybody wants new roofs on the schools. That would really help, accelerate that decision-making for us, too.
No, I mean,
Any thoughts?
No, I think it sounds good. Those locations are interesting. The canopies and things like that, some of those make sense. You can just see it's a natural fit.
Yeah, the other one, I think, just in open discussion, is Blake and high school don't have I'll call it a potential abutter issue. Memorial has maybe more of, we don't like the looks of the canopies in the parking lot. There's a sort of higher density of
Sure.
neighbors so we're working with the schools on, how to engage the community and let them know.
What are the conditions of the roofs of the schools right now? Is that going to be part of the barrier that?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
just if you put rooftop on, it's a 20-year lifetime. So you need a roof that's solar ready, which isn't a big deal, but it's got a 20-year life on it. So I wouldn't.
And the roofs,
Yeah, I think the roof replacement project, I'd have to double check my numbers, but off the top of my head, I believe we were carrying $13.5 or $16.5 million for roof replacements.
they're very expensive.
Yeah.
Very expensive.
As I look at to your question, I'm not sure if these are even good ideas, but I'll give them to you anyway. The things that come to mind for me immediately are, it's going to be easier for us to be more strategic when the municipal building stabilization plan is updated. So that I kind of see as an important thing to have happen. On the parking lot canopies, it's an intuitive reaction. I will be interested when we've had a few of them up to see if, you brought up Memorial School, which I hadn't automatically assumed anybody would have a problem at all, but when we see what they actually look like, we'll have a better sense of whether we actually like what we're doing to our parking lots and our schools. We'll probably see another one, because I think Kingsbury is looking at canopies as well. So we're gonna start getting some experience with canopies that'll tell us from a pure aesthetic standpoint, is this a really good thing? And that's just me anticipating that could happen. I take away from...
I was going to say on that, I think we're checking, I think Westwood just approved canopies for some of their parking
Yeah,
lots.
so this is something we want to address with the school committee too, and one canopy is not like the next. So there are design options, and we definitely would want them to look nice. That's I've seen some that I really wouldn't want to have in Medfield, but that is definitely a big consideration for us.
That's true, rooftop solar panels too. I
Right.
can say that I like how ours look, not necessarily how some other houses have theirs set up. I think a point that I take away from your comments is that if we just look at our overall capital planning processes, and I'll say across the board, I think your point is some of the more complex, maybe more of the building-focused things, we should start to rethink our approach to capital planning in terms of scheduling of things, to recognize that before we jump into some of these, it's not just a matter of funding the project. There's actually some things that it would be worth
Engineering
being
work,
thoughtful
right.
about up front, and that might actually be backing our thought process. It's pulling it 2 years forward, not necessarily with a lot of expenditures, but with some sort of a discipline around looking at stuff that presumably will pay off in the kind of designs we have. So I think that's one thing I picked up tonight that.
Yeah, and I mean,
have-
just on the grant piece, you know, for even the green communities, you know, in order to apply for the grant, you have
Right.
to state how much energy you're gonna save, and you can't do that until you at least do some upfront design work, and that's, you know, 12 months ahead probably of when you actually can spend the money. So that's just
And
one
that
small
probably
example.
ties into the sustainability coordinator that you're advocating for. We're gonna need to understand that better in order to understand how whatever we do to pursue those grants, it's kind of like, as soon as you see it, if you can see the linkage, it makes sense. When it's, well, this person's gonna come in, they're gonna write a lot of grants. That's only about the 5th person we've had recommend be hired in town that's gonna pay for themselves with the grants that they write, and I don't automatically always see, the grants turn into a way we spend more money than we were otherwise gonna spend because we have this resource that's there generating grants. So it's just, you have to understand how that all works.
I think part of what that person would do is also be able to talk to different parts of the administration to make that decision making a little easier and more transparent, and hopefully, make those decisions come in earlier, or discussions come in earlier.
The other thing I personally like, you kind of took the EVs off the table, but I'll put them back on for a minute. When we start looking harder at EVs, the one thing I would like to see, and I would like to have it in black and white, is to the extent the EV we buy is more expensive than the conventional vehicle we buy, I want to know what that number is. May still be justified. I've always thought, gee, at some point, police vehicles, that it seems to me that's going to be easy at some point, because giving your police the fastest vehicles on the road, but they mostly are only local, so they're not going 500 miles down the highway in most cases. It seems to me there will be a time when operationally that's going to make a case. There'll be a case to be made for that, perhaps, and probably straight economics because of the
It's
maintenance.
already there.
Some of these other, like the discussion we just had with Mo, is not always so clear to me that a heavy-duty vehicle, especially something like a snowplow that's not only heavy-duty, but it also works in the wintertime when the batteries are the crappiest, that's necessarily the best idea. But boy, having the fastest police cars, fastest cars on the road.
Gus, one of the other issues with the cruisers, the police cruisers, is that because of the computer boot-up time, they basically leave them running all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So you're having a huge amount of gas consumption just by idling.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'm actually saying I could actually see getting to a cost-benefit analysis on a police vehicle. You'd save money, you'd avoid that environmental issue, but you'd save money on just the maintenance. You'd operationally have a gain, environmentally you'd have a gain, and because of the way we use them, the charging issue, even if that hasn't all been figured out, isn't a big problem. The only question I have is what if any added cost does that option become, what does it cost us to do that?
Yeah, and there should be
Yeah.
some pretty good hard figures on that soon.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't have hard figures on what it's cost, but I know that so there are actually two different kinds of things that the police can have. One is the fastest you're talking about is Mach E, and
That's what we want.
yeah. But the standard, what a lot of police departments are going for right now is the Interceptor, a hybrid version.
Yeah.
And what I hear, it's really becoming the standard right now. It's being what most police departments buy now, and there the efficiency is about a third more efficient than the current one because of that idling issue. So the way it would work is that the battery the Interceptor, as soon as you would normally the hybrid version, as soon as the car would normally idle, it turns off and uses the battery, and then when the battery is low, the engine comes back on, and with during normal use it would charge itself. So you don't even need a charging station because it's not a plug-in hybrid.
So anyway, my point is, I can see, it seems like if we're not quite there yet, we'll be there pretty soon. It's just that if
I think we
doing
are.
that has an added cost, I just like the visibility over it.
Well, that's another, goes back to planning, right? So you know what you're buying in '25, so you can get in front to do the economics in '24.
Especially with EVs, because right now you have to order it to get it into 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
All right, that was it.
thank
So-
you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, next, a discussion of the, I thought I heard a voice, I didn't hear a voice, okay. There it is, Megan, I did hear a voice, Megan.
Do you mind? I got my hand up. So I just wanted to say, with regard to the schools, that we're working with them. We just began our work last week, and we're going to be talking with them again this week. But I just want to reassure the community that we are going to be doing some outreach and education about solar, why solar, what solar panels would look like, what the canopies look like, and that it's just, it's not a done deal at this point. It's, we're working with the school committee to move forward on this front. So I don't want anybody to think we're ahead of ourselves.
Thanks, Megan. Glad you were on tonight.
I just want to reiterate this too. When we go to the school committee on Thursday, we do want them to sign the letter of intent for the canopies, because it is important that we get into the queue for the interconnection as well as for the SMART program. If we don't get into this batch, we'll get in, will cost us about roughly $25,000 to get into the next one. Again, as Megan said, this is not a done deal. This is just to get in line. It doesn't mean that we're going that way, and we will do intense outreach and education over the next few months.
If I understand correctly, part of the part of the justification for PPA now is that we can move on this thing right away because of the programs, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and it is important to get in line, because those opportunities. So, about the charging station at Janes Avenue, right? That's the one we're talking about, and I have to admit, I'm not quite sure how we ended up on the agenda tonight. I'm happy to have this discussion. I don't know if we're ready for a decision on the rate there. I know that the school hasn't made a determination on their rate structure yet. Those are the two charging stations at Blake and at Wheelock. We have looked around, and it's really hard to find out what the standard is elsewhere. It goes anywhere from nothing to somewhere in the range of 40-45 cents per kilowatt hour. I think what I would like to hear from you is what you think the purpose of this particular station is for the town, what you would like it to do for the town as well as for the residents.
So before we even get there, I have a question with what you just covered. So the schools are making their own pricing decisions on their own charging stations. Who pays for the school's electricity is my first question.
Schools.
The schools. And who gets the revenue that comes in from the charging station?
I would assume if the school is making that
Schools.
agreement, it would
So
go
that's
to
a
the schools.
totally close, where I'm coming from here is, so if the school, let's just argue this, the schools just say, no, this is a great education for the kids, we're going to give our power away for free, then who pays for the electricity?
schools?
Using what kind of funds?
Town funds, right?
Taxpayer funds. So I've got some, we'll see where the schools come out, but I have some heartburn about the schools deciding to give electricity away unless the schools have a plan for how they're gonna cut their budget by the amount of electricity they're giving away, because they're making a commitment of taxpayer funds. And when we get to budget time, they're not gonna say, gee, this is what we need for the school, but on top of that, we want you to also subsidize X amount of electricity. So this is probably me talking to the schools right now more than you, but you see what the issue is.
My understanding is I don't believe that they were doing a zero cost.
No,
option.
Okay.
they're not doing it.
They do have they haven't determined what the charge is, but they had been discussing that
Okay.
with Susan McPhee.
I'm delighted to
Yes.
hear that.
Yeah, so
Now, if they're trying to make a lot of money and they go to a really high rate, even though we might not, I'm good with that.
well, so it's not a one-off. I mean, you understand that you can decide how much to charge during what time of the day, who can charge during, so it's very varied. My understanding is preliminary, they're looking at 30 to 35 cents, but that's very early on. And then there's going to be a fee for charging out more than 2 hours, if you're blocking that site. I also understand that there's going to be a distinction between school hours and after hours and weekends. Who can charge, and I don't know if there's also a change in this pricing structure. I really don't know that. So I just don't know, they haven't made any determination.
Comments?
Well, so I'm gonna go back to the discussion we had, I think it was the middle of the summer, that I'm not a supporter of giving away for free, that we're not buying gas for other citizens, so why are we buying electricity for, it's just gonna come down to, I think we also talked about, will it be an app that's managing this? Like, what is the software system that's going to actually manage the charging stations, and then that will lead to what we're charging. I think the app, from what our citizen Jeff talked about, is if you go over your time, you just start paying liquid gold, and that's on you. You can pay liquid gold if you want. It's going to your credit card. But that's my take on it.
Pete?
I think that we have the charging station as an assistance, an amenity to our residents. And so we want it for that purpose. We want it because we know that EV are going to be a lot more numerous in the future, so that we want to be able to provide for that in our downtown area. But I don't think at this point that we really want to lose money on it, so that we just need to figure out what the right cost structure is for it.
So, I don't know if the town has a long-term procurement for electricity, right? We're not in the 6-month cycle that Eversource is. So, we're not tied to any immediate rises. My thinking is that this particular station would probably also service the EVs that the town is now buying. So I would suggest that those would charge for free.
So the ones that we were looking at, including DPW and facilities, they won't use that. They will be using the ones where the vehicles are located at the DPW garage.
Okay.
So that'll be separate from that.
That just makes sense.
And
Yeah, it's where they're
the
located.
summertime conversation we had was, I think I agree with both Eileen and Pete, that we didn't want to give the electricity away for free. We had a discussion of what Bank of America was charging, and it was free for their customers, but it was 50 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that for.
It varies tremendously. So apparently, if certain cars that you buy come with a free charge for so many years, and then the charge for people who don't have a car like that depends on how much load you get, like whether it's a slow charge or high charge, and then it goes by the minute. So
if a car that has free charging parks at Janes Avenue and plugs in, they get.
So I know that Kia and VW have that deal, and apparently the car companies take on that charge.
Right.
So we get it. It's not us.
Nobody's getting
No,
it
it's
free.
not.
So what we talked about in the summer was that the intention was to try to get as neutral a sense of the demand for the charging stations. So we didn't want to give it away so people would pull their car out of their garage in the morning and park it behind the town hall to get free electricity. But we weren't trying to make money as a commercial enterprise either, so we were looking for that sweet spot that covers the cost. If the schools are going through that same drill, and it sounds like they might have a similar philosophy, I would think, all other things being equal, we would like to have policies in our town chargers that are consistent with the policies in the schools. But we might monkey around with the hours that constitutes, you know, school hours versus after hours versus business hours versus after hours. But yeah, I would see some advantage so that anybody in town who's thinking about using town chargers would have some confidence that if they understand how it works for one charger in town, that's a town-provided charger, they would have confidence that they know how it's gonna work everywhere.
Yeah, that's a good idea, to have some sort of continuity across the town. Yep.
So if they're already tackling that technical question, I'm perfectly happy to let them carry the ball on that for a while. And then, you know, my predisposition would be to try to mimic them. And, you know, if we find out we shot low, then in 6 months or some period of time, we can revisit the policy. But
Yeah, so we have a volunteer who's willing to look at the 6 months data and report on that. I think the general recommendation is not to shoot too low because it's bad policy to raise prices.
yeah, well, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But I don't know. That'd be my thought, at least, is all the things being equal, we kind of like it to have it be consistent.
Yeah.
So why don't Frank and I continue to work with Susan and Michael and Amy and come up with a consistent policy to bring. The reason it got on the agenda is Susan asked me to start having this conversation because we knew we wouldn't decide it in one night, and we knew you were going to be here tonight.
Okay.
That's our new policy. We just throw curveball questions at you. If we know you're going to be here, we
Just trying to hold my own here.
yeah, we just carry a standard Ask Hilly item on our agenda. If you show up, we have a question for you, but we can't tell you what it is ahead of time.
But, you know, we'll definitely, I think it would be great to go back out and look at what other towns are doing. It's hard to get data really on that, but, yeah.
You know, one question are we marking the parking spots as, you know, are we blocking off those parking spots sort of like the charging equivalent of a handicap spot?
So that's another question you're going to need to answer as a board.
Well, I would say yes, right? Otherwise, it's kind of silly to have a charging station, you can't put a car there. So the guy moves his other car, that's it.
I'm thinking that's probably true, but I think that does feed into how aggressively we want to be putting charging stations all over the town, because we also have an initiative that says people say we don't have enough parking in town, so locking up a lot of spots. Right now, this is a pilot. We're just trying to figure out what people do, and it's fine. But we'll have that as an issue.
And that's why we said the town vehicles, since they're housed at DPW, would have their own charging down there, so it wouldn't be taking away from any downtown parking.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilly.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is the discussion of the school building committee membership. And just to kick this off, I noticed Seth Meehan is in the attendees tonight. Seth, not to put you on the spot, but I'd sent an email to you, and it sounded like you guys were figuring out who your planning board nominee would be. For those in the audience that don't know this, the 4 appointees that the Board of Selectmen have, one is from the Planning Board, one is designated from the Permanent Planning and Building Committee, and that's Mike Weber. And I just don't know yet. So I think Seth's committee was dealing with that earlier this week, or late last week. And then we have 2. So Seth, if you're in a position to tell us who your committee is putting forward, could you let us know?
Oh, there he is.
Being consistent with the tradition we have of putting people on the spot like Hilly, we figured we could do that to Seth too. There he is. Whenever you're ready, Seth. You're on mute. Or you could just give us a name in the question and answer thing. I've got it up, I can read what you say if it's easier. See, this is how you catch people who aren't paying attention on webinars, is you sit there and you call them and you bring them up, and it's like he's eating dinner somewhere or something right now. And he's just been promoted and didn't know we were going to do that to him. So it's... All right, you know what? When Seth is ready, just break in whenever you're ready to give us an answer, Seth. Maybe we can just have a general discussion of the people that we've looked at, you've looked at, and who you think we should consider for our appointments. I sent out a spreadsheet. I went through all of the nominees and color-coded in a couple of columns the ones who it seemed like that nominee was an appropriate candidate for. So mostly they were candidates that were candidates appropriate for us to consider because they had the building background. There were candidates that were appropriate for the school committee to consider because they had the education background. And then there were candidates in the middle where for the moderator, it was almost like the hinge on the door, where you had some people who had building experience that also made sense for Scott to look at, and you had people who had education experience who also made sense for Scott to look at. And I don't believe, at least the way I did it, that I thought there was anybody who had such a wealth of expertise that they were good candidates for the school committee, good candidates for the moderator, and good candidates for the selectmen. So if you like my cut, then I at least narrowed our list of potential candidates down. And I guess maybe the first question for either of you is, if you didn't like my cut or had any comments about overall the picture, we should hear those first. And then if we're okay with that, maybe Eileen, we start with you with your thoughts.
Well, I'll say first and foremost, I'm very impressed with all of the citizens that submitted applications and resumes. This is not going to be an easy task. There are going to be people that are not going to be selected that I wish to, I know we can't make it bigger, but I mean, there's some really good candidates here. So this is not an easy task. I was excited to see that some of the people that submitted haven't been involved in some of the town process, which to me is a good thing, that new people, they're coming out, they're willing to volunteer. So I'll give you a couple of names that, like for the gentleman, and if I hack anyone's last name up, I apologize beforehand. Anthony Papantonis. I think just the fact that this gentleman is leading a construction company. His company built the Montrose School. If you go to his website, Nauset Construction, you will see that there are retail, government, hospitality, all sorts of different projects he's been involved in. So when I saw his application, I saw his interests. He's been in town, and I don't have his resume right in front of me, but I want to say since 1990 something. It was outstanding.
7, I think, something like that.
Yes.
Yep.
And then a couple other gentlemen, again, and this is where Anthony was a easy number one for me, and then a couple other people's names I'll bring up just so we can talk it through, like John Messina, with all of his experience from being in the construction, especially 40 years of construction, specializing as an electrician, having worked in public safety buildings, worked with different projects for high schools. Again, just having that experience, and I don't believe he's been involved in a lot of committees and all. So I love the fact that some new people want to come forward. Anthony Demon, how do you say that one? Demon.
The Dominicis.
Dominicis.
Yep.
He's a gentleman that's involved with the MBTA capital projects. He's got little kids in the school system. He's got a degree from I see the gentleman from Syracuse. I wasn't sure how we were going to do this, so I didn't have all my resumes out in front of me to just kick this off. But just, again, wealth of experience, again, in the building field. And it's not just a building field, it's just when you read through their descriptions of the different projects they've been involved in, and you think of the request that we're making now is to build a new school, and having to deal with governments, having to deal with bonds, having to deal with all sorts of different dynamics. And then even just when I look at Amy Liberto, who with Fidelity, but when I look through her experience, it just the team building, the interaction. So yes, she was quick to say I don't have building experience, but just some of the various aspects for her career, and you look at what this group of 12 is going to be asked to do. Not everyone has to be in construction. When you look at some of the skill sets, and then I know there are a couple of gentlemen that had experience with not solar, but I should say, what's that? Energy. There we go. I know one of the gentlemen, Michael Chucheria, is that how you say that? He's already on the Medfield Energy Committee. And then there was one other, Bob Donahue, a gentleman that I know just recently moved to town, been in the building construction industry for quite an extensive bit of time, a lot of energy projects specifically. So those are the names that kind of jumped out for me.
Pete?
So were you saying, Gus, that you had given us your cut?
No cut.
This sheet here that had the yellow, I didn't give you my opinion. I only gave you my classification of who I thought the viable candidates.
All right.
In terms of who should we, as the Board of Selectmen, look at, given the specification.
So is that what you're?
So
is
you're
that
pretty-
what
Yeah,
you're
that's
yellow?
what,
that's
yeah,
the
I
sheet.
don't know what his thoughts are on the
Or it's-
people.
So I didn't understand what your yellow was, so I ignored that.
Okay.
So that I just used your sheet to
Okay.
as a
Yeah,
list
that's
of
fine, that's
candidates,
fine. Yep.
and that worked for me.
So you pick 'em.
I guess I would repeat what your opinion was, Eileen, which was that it just knocked my socks off. The number of people that step forward to want to do this, knowing how much time it's going to take,
Yeah.
and the quality of the people, it was just hugely impressive. That was my big worry, that because it had become such a problematic thing the last time, that there would be very few people that would be interested in doing it. But that wasn't the case. And so that the way that I approached it was to look at the bylaw and what we were charged with doing, which is finding people that have expertise in architecture, building engineering, commercial and municipal construction and/or construction law/contracts. And once you focus on those, and I guess that's probably what you're highlighting is intended to do, I ended up in the same place pretty much as you did, I guess, that there's a limited number of them that have that expertise, and so that half of them disappeared off of my list because of that. I mean, they're just hugely impressive people, but they just don't have the backgrounds that the bylaw calls for us to look at. So, and then I've got them ranked. I've got them in the order in which I would select them.
Can you give us that, just to?
Sure. The top candidate I had was the man from Nauset, Anthony Papantonis. The second one that I had was Robert Donahue, who has all of that construction engineering background.
Mm-hmm.
The third one was Michael Cuccinari, and mainly because he has that energy background. My number 4 was Anthony D. Dominiciscus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm not getting that right. Do you want to go a couple more?
Give us all to, yeah.
Chuck Intravaya
Yep,
was my number 5, and John Messina was my number 6.
okay.
And the other people I didn't think fit the criteria, so
Well, this
I
might,
didn't include them.
this is gonna get easy, I think, for us. First off, we did hear from Seth Meehan. Teresa James volunteered from the planning board. So Teresa James is the second kind of prescribed member of this that we'll be appointing, unless there's any violent objections to Teresa James, which I would be shocked to hear if there was. Interestingly, so we're very close. I also chose Anthony Papantonis as the first one, so I think we have a definite choice for, he just has a lot of, aside from being president of a construction company that does this, he's built schools here in town, he's built other schools, he's built other kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Had Suffolk Construction, Perini, I think, so he's got a lot of experience, and he's got kids in town, he's lived here in town, I think it was since 97, if I remember
Somewhere,
right.
yeah, 95,
Something like
97.
that. So for me, that's an easy choice in terms of all that. What I'm really pleasantly surprised by is you all picked we all tended to pick the same people. That's, again, not commenting. There are some people in here that have great skills. They tended to have a particular expertise that might have been good if we had enough people that you could be that specialized. But I went in the same direction you did. My second choice, I picked a couple, but my second choice was Robert Donahoe. And that was strictly because of his broad construction experience. So Pete, that was your second choice. Eileen, that was one of yours. So I think to just get to the bottom line, I think it's probably those two are the ones that we're going to be going with. But just to round things out, I also picked John Messina as somebody, and I also picked Anthony DiDomenis. I'm having as hard a time as you. DiDomenis, sorry,
I apologize
Anthony here.
beforehand.
We couldn't put you on the committee because we didn't know how to pronounce your last name, and we just couldn't stand the pain. No, DiDomenis.
I think
Give me
you
another
got
10
it.
minutes,
I
I'll
think
have
you
that one
got
down. DiDomenis. You can correct me if
And
I
I
got
was
that
ready
one.
to put him on the committee, so.
Well, and the attraction with him is he has capital project experience with a big deal like Amtrak. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that counted in my book. It's just that's rail projects, which is a little bit different. So certainly infrastructure, probably a lot of the other stuff. John Messina, I believe, he was the electrician, and he jumped out at me too. I think it was he jumped out at me too. At one point I said, well, but that's a trade, that's not construction management.
but
But
he's
on
around
the
it
other
all.
hand, when he talked about the projects here in town that he'd worked on, that was something that grabbed me. I'll make one comment, my own thinking about this. I was glad to see that Scott appointed William Warner, because I felt like there needed to be somebody on this committee who had the financial background. Part of why I was more comfortable dropping off the financial folks that we had that specifically were on this list was because I already knew that Scott had picked somebody that he's already communicated with me on the last project. I'm comfortable that he knows what he's talking about with finance, and I think it's important to have somebody there. So I'm pleasantly surprised that with as many options as we had, we came out so close together. It sounds to me like it would be Anthony Pepentonis and Tom Donahoe would be the two that we would appoint.
Robert.
I'm sorry, Robert.
You're renaming people now and
No,
everything.
Robert. No. Incidentally, the reason that name jumps out at me is because all the Donna blanks that I know are Donna Hughes, except for Robert Donahoe, who was in the weekly Hometown Weekly for having just published a book, and I think the title is "Tell Dad Not to Worry," and it's about a guy that was in a car crash his uncle, who had died in World War II, appeared in the car and prevented him from getting hurt in that crash. And it's like, that's a pretty intriguing setup for a book. So the reason, when I saw that name, it's like, this is the second time in like 2 weeks I've seen this name Donahoe, and then I looked, it's like the same guy. So not only is he all the things that are relevant to schools, apparently he's an author, and he has an intriguing book, or at least it sounds intriguing. So that was partly why I guess he caught my eye. Are we good with Teresa James as the designated planning board member?
Oh, of course.
Anthony Pepentonis and Robert, I don't know why I want to call him Tom, Robert Donahoe as our two discretionary appointees. Could I get?
Yes.
And I feel bad I struggle with this because there's so many good ones on here.
Yeah.
And I think there was a comment, so Chuck, I would love to, being on the Affordable Housing Trust and
Oh,
looking
yeah.
at his resume.
Absolutely. Yep, you got it. Yep.
I may reach out to him and see, like, if we can't have him on the school building, if he would be willing to join the Affordable Housing Trust with his background and oh my God.
And I put that in my comments on the spreadsheet. It's like, this guy really looks like a good candidate if we need a
If he would be
affordable
interested,
housing
because we have an
trust.
opening,
Yeah.
that's why.
So Chuck, we're overachieving here on the Board of Selectmen tonight. We're going beyond the 4 and encouraging you to reach out to the Affordable Housing Trust. Somebody have a comment? We're good?
know that the bylaw states that you have to appoint an energy person, and I was wondering if you feel that you have.
Yeah, we didn't have to appoint an energy person. We had to appoint somebody who is familiar with net zero. And yes, we are. You got a president of a construction company that works in this area, absolutely. Beyond that, Mike Weber, I believe, also has experience from the Permanent Planning Building Committee, so, yes. Okay.
But
All right,
we've got one more appointment, and that was gonna be my energy person.
we don't have one more appointment.
No, so if,
We have 4.
Yeah, so we've done Anthony Papantonis, Robert Donahue.
Those are the only 2 we
those
have.
are the
as
2 we have,
discussion.
because then the planning board
Right.
and permanent,
Yeah, Planning Board and Permanent Planning Building Committee are the other 2.
Oh, the permanent planning and
Yeah.
building is one of
That's
ours.
Mike Weber. That's Mike Weber.
Oh,
So,
oh, all right.
can I hear a motion to appoint those
So
4
moved.
people?
So moved.
Second?
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Those are our 4 appointees. Okay. Boy, that was, I thank both of you for, we don't always necessarily have a mind meld on something complex like that one. That was
Well, I mean,
good
there
to
was,
see.
yeah, it wasn't easy. I feel bad that if that we couldn't
Yeah.
select everybody, because there were some really good people.
All right, next item is a vote to sign the 2 roof solar array leases at the Kingsbury Club as the town of Medfield as the ground lessor. And Christine, I had talked to you about the fact I couldn't find the signature block.
Yep,
so-
I believe
I
that.
Only one of
recuse
them.
myself.
Oh, yeah, yeah, sorry, Pete.
Sorry, Pete. Mark is going to address that, and I believe he has an updated one for you.
Oh, this is, oh, okay.
The one form that requires the signatures is the one that's captioned assignment, assumption, and consent agreement. The others are just basically informational. I believe the attorney, Sarah, was to be available tonight if we needed to promote her to answer any questions. Tricot.
Yeah, she's on. She actually has her hand raised.
So this is, basically, when this project was first proposed, it was both the roof and there was a whole canopy system on the parking lot. The canopy system has dropped out. It's just the roof panels now. So this really, the town doesn't really have a serious interest in this paperwork, which has to do with assignments with respect to contractors and who's putting this forward and lenders and insurance and all.
So
It's just a formality that we really have to sign.
Okay, that's what I was.
that's what I thought. I was trying to understand. I was thinking that it was the change in the solar project, but what threw me off was this thing called First Amendment to Option and Lease Agreement, which shows up, I believe, well, that thing has to be signed by Kingsbury and Sunspire.
Right.
But the exhibit for that, Exhibit 1, which is insurance, okay, to your point, if this doesn't matter, this sounds like they've changed the insurance limits. And I was trying to understand, did the limits go up, did the limits go down?
Lender,
And do we care?
my recollection from Sarah was that a lender required the additional insurance, somebody in the process with respect to them.
This is Sarah Trico, Mercury. If you want me to just kind of give you a general overview of the 2. So there's technically, I believe, 3 documents that we'd like you guys to approve/sign. 2 of them are amendments to the existing roof leases. There are 2 portions of each amendment. One is to update the insurance information, and that is Kingsbury Club's insurer has updated requirements, so it's completely Kingsbury Club insured. Yeah, it ups the insurance on a couple. I think
Sarah,
it's
can you
commercial
speak up? I
general
can barely
liability.
hear you.
And then it also has a lost payee clause and subrogation that our insurer wants in there. So to the extent the tenants had insurance, they wouldn't come after our insurance. So rec of our insurer. And the solar tenants are completely fine with that change. And then the second change has to do with assignability. So the way the leases are currently drafted, if the tenant wanted to assign their rights in the lease to anybody, they'd have to come back to get our consent, the Kingsbury Club's consent, and your consent. And apparently, as a practice, the solar tenants have, or they get financed, they can get financed, and oftentimes they assign their rights to an affiliate or one of these financing partners. And from a matter of practice, they requested that, you know, they be able to assign as of right without our consent, but with our notice. And so those are the two amendments to the two leases.
Mark, do you remember when this first came up, when Mike Marcucci was on the board, he dug deep into this assignability issue around, it was, I guess, Sunspire, or the development arm or the marketing arm of Sunspire was coming, and he asked in some depth about who was ultimately going to be the owner of this project. And I thought we already had provisions in the agreement where it couldn't just be assigned to somebody without.
This is not the this has nothing to do directly, at least, with the power agreements that we.
Okay, that was with the power agreements. Okay.
This is the physical structures on that they're installing on the roofs and ownership and rights, etc.
Okay, so only of the physical structure itself, so not the power agreement. Okay, I got it.
It's got nothing directly, at least, to do with anything of providing power to the town or what we pay or anything like that.
Okay, and is there any reason why we as selectmen need to be concerned about the insurance terms?
Again, once the parking lot canopies were taken off the table and were just limited to the roofs of the Kingsbury Club, I don't think we need to be independently concerned. We have the same interest as the Kingsbury Club, right? To make sure that.
And the significance of us signing any of this stuff is simply because we're the ones who are leasing the property of the Kingsbury Club. We basically have to sort of indicate our agreement with what the Kingsbury Club is trying to do.
There's broad language in the ground lease that requires them to get our permission.
Right.
Just about anything that goes on. And then, of course, there's excess of caution, third parties dealing with the situation where the party they're contracting with is a ground lessee, not an owner of the property, so they want to make sure that they're protected if something happens.
Right, okay.
That makes sense.
And there's no risks they haven't thought to ask questions about that you're aware of?
There probably are, but there's risk for everything.
Okay, all right. Motion?
Motion, okay. Motion to vote on the 2 roof solar array leases at the Kingsbury Club as the town of Medfield as the ground leaser.
Second.
And to execute, Sarah, it's just the one agreement, assignment, assumption, and consent agreement that calls for the selectman's signature?
That's it?
I believe the two amendments, the leases have their signature on it as well.
Well,
So
then-
it refers to 2 roof solar array leases, so we're not doing 2 signatures for one lease. We're doing 2 signatures for 2 leases based on at least what the agenda says.
Yep, the agenda, that was prepared by us as opposed based on the documents that
Right.
they submitted, so whatever she tells you.
Okay, run that by us again, Sarah.
Well, I'm looking at the docs, so let me just be sure. Okay, no, yeah, it's just the one, it's the assignment and assumption agreement. We require the board to execute, and then I think we would just want a general, a vote / acknowledgement that it's okay that we execute those 2 amendments to the leases.
Just need a vote or you need a signature?
Both.
Just a vote for those.
You need a vote to approve the proposed transaction and to sign the assignment, assumption, and consent agreement.
Yes.
So we're voting to sign the assignment and assumption agreement, and that
No,
is
no,
in our
no, no.
package?
No, it's assignment, assumption, and consent agreement, and yes, it's in your package.
Assumption and consent agreement, and it is in our packet, and I don't remember seeing it.
I
I'll
have it
just-
as 146, page 146, I just don't know.
Is that, I have First Amendment to option and
No,
lease agreement.
no, it's a different document.
Is it a different
So
document?
Eileen, the
Okay. That's why I
document
read
you're
it wrong.
referring to, the second page, has a bunch of signatures, and it has a place on the right, Town of Medfield, underneath Sunspire Solar.
What page? Because
So-
I looked for signature blocks, I couldn't find any, and I
have-
still
I
can't.
see Leesor being Kingsbury Club Medfield. And I see
Right.
Leesey,
No, no, that's not the right form.
So maybe we
What
might
pa-
not.
I don't think we've seen this.
No.
'Cause that's why I was saying, I didn't see any signature blocks on anything that was in the packet, and you're referring to a document that I have not read,
That's not
as
good.
far as I can tell. Unless it's called something else.
Sarah sent me a communication with 3 attachments. I forwarded that to Brittany, and then I printed out the 3 attachments, so that's what I have.
I don't believe the 3 attachments got to us. That's the
Okay.
only attachment we have.
What's the time criticality of this?
I mean, sooner rather than later, but honestly,
To-
if we could get the vote approving us executing the 2 amendments, that's like a great step in the right direction. And then you
Yep.
guys can take the time to review this
Okay.
document.
So we're gonna vote to approve the 2 amendments. The 2 amendments. To the,
The roof solar array leases, is that what we're?
I guess to the roof, to the roof solar array leases. We can do that.
All right, so Mark, I'm gonna give this another shot, okay? So we are going to vote to approve the 2 amendments for the 2 solar array leases at the Kingsbury Club, Town of Medfield, as a town leaseor.
Roof leases.
Roof leases. Yes, two roof solar array
Roof
leases.
solar array leases. That's good?
You okay with that, Sarah?
Yeah, that's great, and then you guys can, once you're able to review the document.
Yep. Okay. Second? Or did you move yet?
Yeah,
Yes, you did.
I
Move.
moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
All right. I'm glad I asked, thank you, Sarah. Glad I asked the first question, I think. Okay.
Glad you did too.
Next, discussion of appointments to the Pedestrian Safety Committee. We have 5 names: Karen Schneider, Julie Obagi, Phil Jennings, Marie Davis, and Shane Medeiros. We talked last time about appointing 2 people. I think we have some agreements on who those people might be. And Karen, you're on the list. Well, why don't we start with what you're recommending?
So before we start,
Can you make
there,
the microphone?
there was another name put forward and it's not on this list. What happened to Gabby Harrison?
The neighborhood sent me the 2 names that were to be included from Causeway Street, which I believe was why we took her name off.
Well, Gabby volunteered for this committee about 6 months ago, so, I mean,
Then that's my fault for leaving her off. Not intentional.
okay.
Okay.
Gabby Harrison.
So, Harrison, so I'm going to suggest at the very so is Gabby Harrison a Causeway Street
She lives on
resident?
Causeway Street, yeah.
We're the other side of Causeway, though.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to do something, and both Eileen and Pete can shoot me down if they don't like what I'm doing here. Last time, however confusing my statement may have been, I was suggesting, because we were hearing from the Souls of Medfield and the Causeway Street neighborhood, and we had only 2 positions that we were trying to fill, that given that there was an overlap in the membership and everything, it made some sense at that point in time for us to have 1 Causeway Street rep, 1 Souls of Medfield rep, recognizing that perhaps the Souls of Medfield rep might also be from Causeway Street, but nonetheless, that's what I was hoping for. And Karen, because I know you had an interest, and because you have a good right to have an interest, my first thought was, in my book at least, you had a right of first refusal. So I'm inclined to take your recommendation, speaking personally, not committing either of these. If Gabby Harrison is a Causeway Street representative, what I'm trying to figure out is, does that mean we should defer that to give you all time to think that through? And obviously, Lauren, that then impacts the recommendations you've made from Souls of Medfield. So what I'm trying to do this in a good way.
So the other reaction that I have to this situation is that if we have more people that are interested than positions, let's enlarge the number of positions and include these people and let them work for the town.
And the reason we don't want to do that, they're more than welcome to come to the meetings. The reason we don't want to do that is the structure of the committee has been specified, and the committee operates based on votes. So simply packing lots of people on the committee who have a particular view doesn't help the committee get to constructive recommendations.
Oh, I don't know that anybody has a particular view of any of these people. I mean, I certainly don't know what their views are.
I'm looking for a geographic differentiation and everything. The idea isn't just put a lot of people on the committee. In fact, one of the best committees that I've seen is one that has 3 people that are actually doing anything, and I'm just trying to stay out of the way, and that was the Medfield State Hospital Development Committee. So numbers don't automatically get something there. If there's something added, I'm just trying to figure out whether we have to defer this yet again, or whether we can get that. I don't want to. I don't want to. Okay.
When I saw you back there and I saw you on the agenda, I'm like, oh man, this is.
So let me try this, Pete. I'm prepared tonight to designate 2 people that I think are reflect the recommendations of 3 people sitting here right now. If there is an overwhelming, compelling reason why there is yet another person who is bringing something unique to the table that should be, I mean, truly, that we would all recognize as bringing something that should be added to the committee, we would be prepared to entertain a recommendation from Chief Garrett to add and expand that committee.
Sure.
Does that work all right?
As I say, my suggestion would be to expand the committee.
But we need the compelling reasons, and so I'm not saying that can't happen.
The compelling reason is that we have a lot of interest. So.
No, but I appreciate where you're coming from, Gus. Okay, I think the chief if she's spearheading this, it's not for us to say we're going to add 3. Like, there's a structure that she's asked us to work with. There's a group of people that have expressed interest. I mean, tonight, look at all the people that we couldn't say yes to. So it's like, at some point, we can't say yes to everyone, but I definitely want to make a decision tonight after having sat here.
Right, absolutely.
I would disagree, Eileen. I think that we can say yes to everybody.
What's that?
Well, we don't have
we can
agreement on-
expand the committee, and we can say yes.
But I think you start with the chief who's running it, right? The person who's running it, instead of us just saying we're going to put them on. I think if she's running it and
well, I guess I don't think of the chief as running it. I think of the chief as being a representative on the committee. The committee is a citizen committee, really.
But this ultimately translates into recommendations coming to the Board of Selectmen about things to do with the streets.
Yeah, she should be part of it, for sure.
So where were you headed?
So whatever I was headed is that it's actually what I just said. In my view, I consider the police chief to be the chair of the committee.
Mm-hmm.
Virtually every committee we have, we listen to what the chair recommends, and then we make appointments based on that. This was a little bit different for some good reasons of urgency and strong interest. But this is not the normal way we do it, is to tell committees, who they're gonna have on their committees. We let the committees come back in with recommendations. Most of the time, they recommend keeping all the people that they want on the committee. I'm not sure I can think of a time when we've had a committee chair say, would you please get rid of this person? And usually you just go through
But I think-
your resignations, and usually it's the recommendations that are coming in from the chair of the committee itself that are the ones that we would ordinarily go with. So we're getting into a process here
Well,
with us
but-
making decisions. It's not the normal way we operate on a committee.
Yeah, this is a committee that it really hasn't been functioning for a long, long time. And so that, I mean, it's really being created anew. And we're the ones, as the select board, that make the choices about how committees are structured. So that, you know, you're
And
saying that we
there's a
don't.
charter for this committee.
Yes, and we can change it.
Well,
And
you
so-
don't have support at this point in time to change it, because there's no compelling argument, other than that you have somebody who wanted to volunteer. I'm saying, the door's open to do that, except I would want to hear from the police chief if that's something that the police chief wants on the committee.
I hear you saying that, Gus.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Eileen wants to enlarge the committee to include the residents that want to serve or not. If she does,
Okay.
then the
Well,
then the
then-
two of
then-
us will make it
I would
happen.
like, honestly, I would like to leave the committee the way it was initially set up. Let's get the members on, let's get a new member, let's get the committee going. That's my biggest concern. And then, when the committee starts going, if there's a request to that group to say, you know what, can we bring another one on? It's up to them. I don't want to dictate that tonight.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's just for the TV.
It's for the
Yeah.
TV folks.
Okay, so I just want to say on behalf of this old Medfield, I did hear 2 spots, and I have come to terms with the fact that was a misunderstanding, and so we did put forth 2 names of Julie O'Bag and Phil Jennings, and I just want to say publicly that we support both of these candidates because both of them are extraordinary and would represent the community of Medfield and would represent the souls of Medfield, and we feel very strongly about both of them. And I do think if there is ever an opportunity to expand the charter, then, you know, there are some amazing people that could be on the committee. But we would like to recommend Julie specifically because she was the one who spearheaded the Share the Road campaign, and I think she has the best kind of understanding of where, you know, people have issues in the community. Because everybody was asking her for a sign because they feel strongly about the need for it in their community. So, but I do want to make very clear that we feel very strongly about both of these candidates, and should there be an opportunity to expand the charter, I hope that you will consider the other people that nominated as well.
Lauren, who was your second one? Julie, and who was the other one?
Phil Jennings.
Phil Jennings?
So could I go back to Karen? Karen, it takes a lot of guts to volunteer or step forward with what you're doing. So I'd personally like to hear what you're recommending.
Yes, in my family's experience, when we go through a rough patch, we end up trying to get back and do good out of whatever bad experience we've gone through. And so even talking with my mother about this, she said you have to do something to give back. And so since the beginning in June, I thought, well, there's a safety committee, I'd like to serve on that committee. At the same time, not knowing if emotionally and just time commitments with kids and work, if it would all be possible. And so I definitely similarly wanted to get moving and want people on the committee who they represent the town well, all different groups in the town. I guess I'm okay taking some time to myself and my family. Julie can serve, and like I trust her immensely given the way she kind of responded with Joel's initial accident death, and just, I don't know, she's kids my kids' age, they're walking from Dale downtown to I don't know, has been an extremely good friend. She's, so is Medfield, and she lives on South Street, another busy road, so I don't know, I trust her immensely, and I guess I'm still gonna attend the committee meetings, so you're not gonna get rid of me. Same. It's just, yeah.
Speaking personally, I'm prepared to appoint Julie if you
Yeah.
are.
I absolutely want to close this meeting with knowing we've assigned people and we can get rid of.
We'll do it one at a time, Pete. We have a further discussion, or are we good with one at least? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Chris Potts. Just to piggyback though on what Pete said,
But I just think if there's a larger question about associate memberships in our various committees. You know, we have a hard time filling volunteers, getting volunteers for short slots. Other committees may not be as difficult. I think just overall, in terms of civic engagement, and getting as many people involved in the community as possible, I think it's really good to really look at that in the large picture in terms of what committees we can add associate memberships to, just to get people into the channel and get them involved.
Yeah, I totally agree. And my only point on that, Chris, is that with the exception of the OPEB Trust Fund Committee that actually has a legal, it was when it was established, it basically, I had to resign from that in order to bring Steve Callahan on, which was a massive upgrade to the quality of the OPEB Trust Fund Committee. But when we did talk about, we had yet another person who wanted to be there, who's a young woman only a few years out of college. I would have loved to have had an associate membership, except the legal document didn't allow that. So I think the only formal place that we've had associate members has been the ZBA, because
Planning board,
that's
thing?
kind of,
Provided by
is the
statute.
plan, oh, no, planning board too, huh?
So in most cases, it's either provided by statute or it's provided by the charter and bylaws.
Yeah, so, well, I can see there's a couple of committees where I think the reason people do that is it takes a while to learn the ropes. Philosophically, as far as committees go, any committee that wants, I mean, if it's a charter issue as opposed to a legal issue, I absolutely totally agree with you. Any committee that wants associate members should have them. By the same token, and you know, your husband Jerry and I both know, we spent several years on the state going to state hospital master planning committee meetings. Neither one of us was on those committees, but we made every meeting. And the committees ran themselves in a way where we weren't wasting our time there, that we were heard. So when we talk, I think philosophically, if a committee comes in and says, we'd like to change the charter so we can have associate members, that's an easy one. And even if it's not, for whatever reason, something that happens with the committee, there's nothing to stop people from coming to committees they're interested in. And my experience, at least, has been if you're a member of the public who goes to a committee and conducts yourself in a way that you may have opinions and views, but you deliver them in a way that's collaborative and respectful, and you're listening at the same time you're talking. I don't know too many committees that will sit there and ice you out for like months at a time. Look at Bill. He's been to more selectman meetings than I have, and he's never been a selectman, but he's here all the time. So there's plenty of room for heck, Chris, you've been here probably more than I have too. There's room for people to do that. Absolutely. So what I'm not trying to push you here, Pete, faster than we need to. I'm suggesting that could we at least appoint Julie as a first step? The conversation's not done yet. I just going to say that one, can we consolidate on that one?
Why are we choosing Julie over Phil? Julie and Phil are the sole's recommendations, is that it, Lauren? Okay. Why are we picking Julie over Phil?
Because Karen, who had volunteered, speaking
Oh, you're
personally,
deferring to Julie?
Karen is the one.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Sure, let's appoint Julie then.
Okay, I have a motion.
I would move to appoint Julie Albagi to the Pedestrian Safety Committee.
Close enough? Do I have a
Second
second?
that. I
Okay,
second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have one. Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Did I get close,
Thank
Julie?
you, Karen. Obagi.
Albagi.
Just the way
Thank
it's
you.
written. Now we have a second, so now I'm willing to listen to the two of you on whether we want to close on the second appointment tonight, or whether, Lauren, you've made a recommendation for Phil, which would be the logical second choice based on what's on the table here. Pete, you're making a case that Gabby actually volunteered a long time ago, which is, I think, true.
Mm-hmm.
Should we defer the second appointment until we've had the fair chance?
I would like to do that. I don't remember Marie Davis's and Shane Medeiros' criteria at this point.
So Marie Davis came from an email from the Causeway Street neighborhood after the last meeting saying that we'd like that to be our representative from the,
Do we have any information about the two people?
just the recommendation from Marie from the Causeway Street neighborhood. I believe they polled everybody on who they would like to recommend. and it was you, Karen, and Marie. And Shane had requested to be on the committee over the summer and lives in the Green Street area.
In the
So-
which area?
Green Street.
And is not a member of Souls of Medfield.
No,
So,
he is not.
so, and Gabby isn't she's also Causeway Street?
She lives on Causeway, yes.
So, but she's at the other end of Causeway Street, so there's a little difference. So the only point that I'll make administratively is Chief Garrett mentioned that when the committee is voting on a recommendation that has an impact on a particular neighborhood, the members of the committee that live in that neighborhood don't vote, which if we were to go in the direction of Gabby, would have 2 Causeway Street. Let the committee figure out whether at the other end, whether you have to preclude, I don't know whether you have to recuse yourself. That's how the committee operates. If we do that, I also think probably Shane Medeiros, who I know nothing about at this point, probably is also in the mix, and I'm guessing perhaps Marie, in light of where we are now, would not necessarily be a candidate. Is that?
So Julie, do you live on South Street or do you live on Causeway? You live on South Street. Yeah, so she's on a Causeway.
Oh, you're not
Yeah, that's why
Causeway?
it's like-
Oh, okay, okay.
Really confused.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
why I needed to
okay.
clarify that before we went any further.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's our sole
Okay.
representative. I think Marie's your Causeway representative from after the last meeting.
Okay, so we have 2 Causeway representatives, Marie and Gabby.
Yes.
We have a Green Street rep,
Shane.
Shane.
South Street with Julie. And Phil is
Pleasant.
Pleasant. Oh, right, okay.
So what would help? And again, if this isn't doable, then we'll just, I think we're gonna have to have all 4. If all 4 are still viable candidates, first point, then we need to see the backgrounds for all 4 at the next meeting, and then we're gonna have to make a decision about who we think the best additional candidate would be.
December 6th?
The December 6th
Okay.
meeting, and let's do it that way. There'll be 3 people that we're not gonna get picked. And we'll just have that discussion for the second one.
And out of respect to them, and hopefully you guys can appreciate this, not knowing the other ones, I just don't want to just pick out of thin air. I think I know Shane, so I think it's important that we at least
Yeah.
give, so no one feels like we just cherry pick something. That works.
Correct, and this is why it's important to ask in person, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like after the last meeting that you were almost giving a spot to somebody from Causeway, so it seems like those residents should be the priority, in your next decision.
Well, the only thing I'd be concerned with is, and I'm not saying this in the wrong way, but if what I just heard you say is if something comes up to vote and you don't actually get a vote on your road, that would be horrible.
But that's a thing that anybody on the committee would have
Okay.
to deal with. I mean, there's South Street, like,
Yeah.
so I feel like that's a.
Okay.
So let me-
I definitely heard, I mean, obviously I misheard because I thought you were offering
Mhm.
these 2 spots, but it seems to me like if I were a resident on Causeway, I would very much think that you offered me a spot on the.
So I think that the distinction it probably is, you probably heard Gus say that, maybe? You didn't hear Eileen and me say that.
This is one of those times when being in the minority gives you an out. Just to respond, Karen, I'm to some degree trusting your judgment about who you would most like to be there is based on the fact that you think that at least the person you're supporting is someone who will take the Causeway neighborhood into account. So I don't feel like I've totally just ignored that. On the other hand, there's nobody actually on Causeway right now. We have 2 candidates on both ends, and I don't think that's an irrelevancy. So I wouldn't disregard that by any means. On the other hand,
They know about each other either.
they may not. It would be kind of nice if they realize, I'll just say, if we hear from all 4, if any of those 4 say, now that I know what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think you should not worry about me. I'll go to the meetings I can make. That would be great. And Lauren, I'm being sensitive to you. You had Phil, who's not on Causeway, and then Shane, who's on Green, that I don't know as much about, maybe represent. So we're trying to be
Well,
as.
and Julie, when you say South Street, are you South Street up by the high school or South Street over by? So if we're thinking along lines of streets, like, so she's on South Street and Phil's on just the other side if he's over in Pleasant Court or Pleasant
Yeah.
Street, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So So my concern with this is making sure that sections of town are really covered, because if you don't travel a certain area, you're blind to some of the challenges that go on.
Right.
So when I hear Green Street, that actually is encouraging, because there's a lot of kids that come down from Flintlock and all those
Right.
smaller
Right.
side
So-
roads.
So, I mean, we're trying to figure out the best way to get the voice. I think we recognize that groups like Souls of Medfield have both perhaps a more coherent voice and perhaps a stronger interest because they use the roads more. We're just trying to figure out how to get the right representative that gets that perspective in there. So we good? We're good for now, and we'll pick that back up with the second. All right. Okay.
Thank you for being super patient.
Yes.
You probably learned more about solar stuff tonight and sidewalks than you got yourself roped into.
I think I still feel bad from the meeting where everybody had to listen to the Deerfield stuff.
Right. All right. Item 10, vote to open the annual town meeting warrant. Warrant is slated to close on January 10th, but we can't close it if we don't open it.
So moved.
Valid fact. Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Let's see. That's approved. Item 11, vote to sign the contract with the Russo Bar Associates, Inc. for the MSH Chapel leak investigation and repairs.
So moved.
Well, I made the
You have a
point
question?
that the attachment A was not there, so
Nope.
we only have the town contract.
I thought, okay, when I was reading, okay.
Yes, unfortunately, I did not put it in there. I did update it this afternoon and included it in there, but if you'd like to wait until the next, we're just getting kind of late in terms
It
of
would
getting.
only be, it would be scope of work and compensation only.
Well, that's kind of the
Yeah.
only part that we really care about.
Right.
But
It is currently a not to exceed fee of $8,000.
is this the same attachment A that we
Yes.
saw a week or a meeting ago? So what happened last meeting is we had attachment A, but they had not yet agreed to the terms of the town
Correct.
contract. This time we have the town contract, but not attachment A. But if attachment A hasn't changed from what we saw 2 weeks ago,
Exactly.
I'm prepared to entertain a motion to approve the contract.
Yes, same here.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Pete?
Yeah, I made the motion.
Do I have a second? I've been waiting for the second here.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.
Opposed? Motion
Thank you very
carries.
much.
Thank you, that's done. That's a interesting sequence, but good. Next, vote to allow the Medfield Lions Club to attain a one-day license pursuant to Chapter 90-3, bypassing the prohibition of possession or consumption of alcohol on town-owned property for a BYOB event at the Council on Aging Center on December 6th from 5:30 to 9 p.m. I have to say, I believe this is the first time I've ever seen this particular kind of a request. Bypassing the prohibitions. I like things that bypass prohibitions on principle most of the time. Do we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
I second it. They can have cocktails while we're doing our meeting.
Well,
yeah.
I did notice it starts at 5:30.
Yeah,
so-
yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, I'm in favor. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. I'm curious just to see how they all survived that 3.5 hour period without the supervision and prohibitions that the town normally imposes on people out to have a good time.
Tuesday night.
Item 13, vote to authorize the chair of the Board of Selectmen to sign the award contract for the FY 2023 Housing Choice Grant Program, otherwise known as the One Stop
What was that? One
Program. Christine, you want to talk about this?
Yes, this is an expansion. As you'll recall, we did the Rapid Recovery Grant for the downtown. We've been implementing projects for that based on economic development. We applied after you had your discussion about goals. We applied actually, I believe it was over the summer. With the Board of Selectmen having set a goal of attracting diverse commercial uses to town, this will help with growing the tax base. We would like to do some long-term planning and visioning, and this is the commercial and industrial area within the West Mill Street area. And this, we applied for the one-stop growth application. The state then determines where they will appropriate that money from, and they have chosen the Housing Choice Program. This project is not related to rezoning for housing. This is really looking at a long-term strategic plan for economic development in that area.
Good.
So.
Questions?
Nope.
Questions, Pete?
No.
The only question, I didn't think to ask you this question when we talked this afternoon. When it says North Meadows Road, does it extend all the way up to where, like, Potpourri? Like, is it just literally the West Mill, West
No, it
North Meadows?
includes Potpourri, anything that was in that
It's gotta go all the
industrial.
way up to
Yep.
look at. That's great. Okay. Have a motion?
Vote to authorize Chair of the Board of Selectmen to sign the award contract for the FY 2023 Housing Choice Grant Program.
Okay, and that's for anybody who cares, that's a $45,000 grant. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Okay, and next, vote to approve the expenditure of $6,800 to Stumpy's Tree Service for tree removal and maintenance work on the state hospital grounds. Any questions?
I've walked up there, I know what needs to be taken down.
Okay.
I believe several of you may have pointed them out to us.
Yes, a few times.
Pete, any questions?
No questions.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next. Item 15, vote to authorize $6,000 for barriers, tree lighting, and extra lights for pedestrian safety during the holiday stroll on December 2nd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, vote to authorize Chief Carrico to sign the ambulance service affiliation agreement between Medfield Fire Department and Steward Norwood Hospital. And I understand this agreement is effectively the same agreement that we have. This is basically, I think, restoring the agreement with Norwood Hospital that kind of had to be discontinued because of the flooding.
Correct.
I thought they tore the building down.
It's going back up.
So what, does this go into effect now, or what's the timing?
It goes into effect now.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, vote to award a revised automotive license to Keegan's Auto Sales LLC for the remaining 2022 calendar year due to a change in business entity. I think that must mean that they became an LLC.
Yeah.
Correct.
Ah, that's, okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, sign the citations congratulating the following individuals in Boy Scout Troop 89 for earning the rank of Eagle Scout: William Henry Whitaker, Hayden Christian Sutherland Gray, and Joshua L. Lozano. And I'd say their Eagle Court is on the 26th
Yeah.
of November, which is Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's approved. And next, sign the citation congratulating the following individual in Boy Scout Troop 10 for earning the rank of Eagle Scout: Madeline Frances Rothstein, and her Eagle Court is this
weekend.
coming Saturday, the 20th,
At 1 p.m.
1 p.m. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 2 approve, 0, and 1 abstention.
All right, so I will be at that one, so
Okay.
if you need to give
Yep.
me anything.
Yeah, they're in the folders.
great.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, 20, vote to authorize the Chair of the Board of Selectmen to sign the Massachusetts School Building Authority draft audit report with a final total facilities grant amount of $397,806, of about $25,000 of
This
which
is
they
the,
still owe us.
yeah, the last amount
Yep.
coming back to us.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Yep.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Citizen comment? We're getting down. It's getting bleak out there. All right. Okay, let's see. Then consent agenda. The Medfield Garden Club requests to place sandwich boards in the usual locations advertising their holiday home sale from November 27th through December 3rd. Second item, request by the Lowell Mason House to place sandwich boards in the usual locations advertising the 8th holiday concert from November 19th through December 3rd. And third item, memo requests a parade permit for the holiday parade on December 3rd at 1 p.m. Have a motion to
So
approve.
moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And just a
Motion
reminder, you're invited to participate in the holiday parade as well. So,
Yeah, yes.
okay.
In
Didn't
that.
want you to miss that.
Are you guys gonna show up for that?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a question of reserving the costumes. It's the-
Check. Well, you know, Still, those baseball hats would go with baseball players.
That's right, we never got our
It's
hats,
always-
did we?
It's always good to know one person new to show up for opening day parade this past year, and she was the rookie. Let's see, meeting minutes, September 7th, September 27th, and October 11th. Are we all ready to, I had editorial revisions that all get posted in there.
Same here.
And the minor thing I didn't catch, Christine, on the 27th is Hilly's last name is P-A-S-S-A-S as opposed to I-S.
I'll make sure that gets changed.
I think I've reviewed these, because I don't think I have any ones that I haven't reviewed, but I don't specifically
Well, those were
remember.
just sent to us, the 27th and 11th.
That was this past-
Brittany just sent maybe last
About a week-
Thursday?
About a week, yeah, last week.
Oh, then I have, because I've been straight out since then, so
Okay.
I have not
So
seen
we'll
these.
defer, you'll
Yep.
have to defer all of them, but you've,
Well, the 7th was the Goals workshop. So that
Yes.
one I think Pete had approved a couple weeks ago.
because
I was the one that
we
held
actually
it up.
did defer some of them from before.
You deferred the 7th, yeah.
So we can do the 7th then?
Yeah, because that one I.
That one was one we already had
That was the
deferred.
one that was really
Okay.
long and.
Yeah. So can we, can we?
Move to approve the minutes for September 7, 2022.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. So that's approved. The 27th and October 11th are both deferred. But I think, Pete, you're the only one that's left, as long as you pick up that one typo correction on Hilly's last name, Christine.
Yep, I'll take care of that.
Town administrator updates.
I just have a brief update. I know we touched on this a couple weeks ago, and I just wanted to draw your attention. We talked about Jean Minio had received the grant for the remediation at the chapel, and I just wanted to make sure you were also aware that meant that she was beginning the work on the chapel, and you have the right as the Board of Selectmen to review that work if you would like. But they'll be doing some plaster and some asbestos remediation, I believe. Mark has been working with Jean on those contracts, so just to give you a heads up that you can review that work if you would like.
So that means we review it before she does it, after she does it, or while she's doing it?
I would let you pick all three.
That was in contemplation, frankly, of any kind of work done before before they actually undertake it.
Ah,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, not asbestos remediation, I'm sorry, pipe insulation, so.
Asbestos, I think
Sorry.
I'd stay away
No,
from
no,
that.
no,
I
I'm
think you're
sorry.
in a full suit if you guys want to go.
Spending a lot of time with Trinity today.
Jean was on a roll over the summer, and she didn't want to lose momentum by having the winter come and slow things down. Okay,
And that's all I have this evening.
okay. Let's see, selectmen report, let's see, yes, next meeting dates, December 6th, December 20th, and then January 10th and 24th. Selectmen reports.
I'm just going to give you guys a quick heads up on December 6th. I am having the lovely pleasure of having a tooth extracted, so I've talked to Christine. If I'm not doing well, because I've had issues in the past, I would do that one hybrid if you guys are okay with me potentially dialing in from Zoom.
Sure.
Hopefully I'll
Sure.
be here, but I've had issues in the past.
We can all go to your house and make you tea and stuff like that.
I mean,
You know you're really gonna be at the Council on Aging, so.
The
The
that would
remote,
take away the pain.
by default, the remote participation kicks in anyway, so you
Right.
can do that anyway.
Right.
Say that one more time.
So even before COVID,
Right.
we had the provision where as long as a quorum is
here.
present, you could have, in our case, one person who's actually dialing it. I did one from Black Mountain, New Hampshire, 2 winters ago, I think.
Okay, all right, great, okay.
The only kicker is that all votes will have to be roll call votes, but
Right.
that's,
So,
All
because of
votes
the
are-
background noise, I
all
can't.
votes are roll call, but when somebody's coming in like that,
Yeah.
all votes are roll call
Okay.
votes.
Okay, cool.
But we hardly vote on anything in these meetings anyway, so it's.
All right, so my selectmen notes. I sat in, just because of some of the meetings we've had, and I say this in a good way, I sat in the MMA Municipal Conflict Management, which I found, it's helpful, just trying to manage some of the topics that can come up and cause a little tension. I also sat in because I saw a link to it, Open Meetings and Public Records Law 101, to refresh what I had done for an online test when I first got elected. So I found that helpful, just refreshing, what we're supposed to do, not supposed to do. The thing that that it reinforced, and, you know, something we've talked about we don't do is we don't do the serial communication, which is, I talk to Christine, and then Christine goes over there, that, you know, we keep this very clean, and that was one of the topics I actually brought up in the video, that's just something that, you know, we need to be conscious of, and I know we are. And then I'm sitting in tomorrow, there's an MMA webinar for funding sources for affordable housing initiatives, seeing that I'm in the Affordable Housing Trust, find out what's happening there. And then I was able to attend the Veterans Lunch this past Thursday, which was fantastic. Really nice turnout, met some super nice folks. Richard DeSorga did an amazing job honoring 5 veterans, starting with, and I do not remember all the names, but I do believe it was Meany was the very first one back in like 18 something. Just hearing, you know, he's an author, so the way he described what was going on was fascinating. So just awesome tribute that for the servicemen. And then it was obviously went down for the election. It was a nice turnout. I think kudos to Marion and her team. That was a pretty busy day. That was, I think, one of the highest turnouts for an election of that type. So nicely done. And then question for the group: where are we with confirming our goals? We spent a lot of time. We did the workshop on the goals. We've confirmed the minutes. I think the last thing hanging out there was clarifying the 6th goal.
Yeah, that ball, I think, is in my court
Okay.
to redraft that. The other thing we haven't really, the other thing we haven't really done is come to closure on our assessment of the goals. So I had done that color-coded assessment. We had that conversation. We actually have, I think it was the goals workshop that had had the minutes from that. But we've never actually, like, that was my draft to you guys, but we never came to closure on that. So I do think actually one of the things we should do to pick up on that is, aside from adopting a new goal complete, we actually have to update all the other 5 areas.
And so what's good is I sat through, I told you guys how I do my minutes. I literally sit through the YouTube meetings, right?
Yep.
So like I pick up, so I went through, that was a pretty intense YouTube to sit through, because and then to do the minutes along with it, it was really, it was tough. But that being said, we did agree to, so the things that you had in green, we acknowledge were completed. We could remove those.
Okay.
Right? I think
This is the good thing about listening to your own videos, because I don't remember us doing that, but that's good.
Well, no,
Okay.
because you said, okay, so if it's green, and I've said it's complete. Now, at no point when we went through it, to the best of my recollection, which is as frequent as, I think, Friday or Saturday, when I went to Brittany and said I went through it, we agreed that if it was green and you had complete, we're good. The yellow-orange was still in process, and then you put some red ones that were new.
Right.
And I don't believe, and Pete, you can correct me if I'm misquoting, is we didn't push back on any of those. We got into discussions about why they were appropriate and like the housing and all that. So I would say if you went in and literally wiped out the green
We can do that.
and laid out the
What's
yellow,
left.
what's left, I think
okay.
it would be fair.
Then the only thing, I can absolutely do that. And what I will do is send them to Christine, I guess, and then Christine, you can distribute them out ahead of time. The only thing I would suggest is that, especially on new goals, that, like, I put stuff in new that occurred to me, but maybe I didn't think of everything, or, maybe there's some other things we should talk about.
Okay, so let's get the cleaned up document, and then Pete and I can
So why don't we put that on December 6th
December 6th,
agenda?
yeah.
Okay.
Great. And other than that, I will be heading to Madeline's Eagle Scout ceremony on Saturday afternoon, so when we get that, I'll take that with me. And I think, other than that,
Pete?
First of all, the Energy Committee met, and the TomCap comment period has ended. They discussed their candidate for the school building committee. In terms of the renewables, it was mainly the solar at the schools that got discussed, and they're trying to work with the schools to get the schools going forward finally with solar. Transportation sector, they're trying to get the police department to look at EVs. Especially because of the need to idle the cruisers 24/7 to keep the computers running. There was a discussion about the EV chargers and the rates. No conclusions. And let's see, the ZBA held that ground source heat pumps are not wells and do not require permits. That was just an informational announcement, I guess. The Medfield Foundation's Legacy Fund held a meeting last night where the grantees, the 4 grantees, came and reported on what they had done. It was actually fascinating. Rob Gregg brought a video that the Medfield TV had done on the Peak House Heritage Society dig that was funded by the grant from the Medfield Foundation Legacy Fund. The High School Theater Society showed the cyclorama, which is the big, heavy curtain that hangs at the back of the stage that they bought with their grant. The outreach reported on the survey that had been funded by the grant that they got, and the information that Kathy McDonald shared is very interesting information about what's going on in town. And let's see, who was the other one? Fourth one was slipping my mind at the moment. So, but it was fascinating to see the progress that everybody had made. At my office hours this past week, someone came and was looking for pickleball in town. Eileen, I thought of you, and so I connected him with Park and Rec and related to him what I found out from Roberta at the Council on Aging, which is that she had looked into pickleball, $65,000. She lost interest. And I second what you said about the Veterans Lunch. It was just a fabulous event that was put on. Roberta Lynch did the cooking herself, and it was just great. Richard's recounting was just dramatic and just fascinating. He was really good at it. I told him how good he was at it. It really was entertaining. He put you in the position of these veterans, and that's it.
I had as far as formal meetings went, I had a quiet week. I had to miss the Veterans Lunch because I had client stuff. I actually have had a series of conversations from either phone conversations from people that have reached out, or in a couple of cases, meetings. And I don't need to get in details of all of them, but actually they all in one way or another were getting at community dynamics, I guess would be the way to put it. People concerned about particular issues, things that are going on, and it was educational to some degree. It was educational for me to hear what was on people's minds. In some cases, it was helpful to them to hear more about what's going on, just because we're selectmen and we know what's going on in a way that just the average resident wouldn't have any reason to know. And so some of those conversations I think were a bit, I'll say, reassuring maybe, or at least things didn't. I think they were helpful, I guess. So that was one thing that happened. And I have one humorous story which is related to what I did this last 2 weeks. I was at this, a lot of times I'll go to the transfer station on Saturday and then I'll swing by the state hospital on my way back home because it's on the way. And it's sort of like a random sampling about, do we have road dogs and are people behaving and what's going on. And so I did that. And as I was leaving, I looked down, so I'm going down the main exit to the road, and as I look across the green, I see 2 ambulances with the lights flashing, and I look and there's like 3 cars on the road. We're not talking at the stone gate, we're talking on the state property, and one of them's got a hood that's completely smashed because they ran into the light pole. And so, the selectmen in action, I pull over into the stone gate, I start walking up in my really grubby pants and my really grubby baseball hat, and I try to pass myself off as a selectman to this guy coming down in his ambulance, EMT uniform, and I go, excuse me, I'm Gus Murby. I don't want to be nosy here, but I'm on the Board of Selectmen. What has happened here? And the guy looks at me and goes, we're filming. It's like, oh, I just approved that. I just approved that.
Take
so,
2.
Yeah, so I quietly walked away, get back in my car.
You wanted to walk on roll. Don't kid me.
No. I just like, oh, boy, you're really paying attention. Well, technically, we didn't say what day. We said it was a day. We didn't say
Yeah, it
what
was-
particular
No, we
day.
try not to give out the day.
Right, right.
So
Well,
that
it
people don't
worked.
go
It worked. It
unsaid.
really worked. And they had me hook, line, and sinker. It's
It's a short independent film.
Say-
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I don't know, maybe they filmed me coming in, because there would have been a little
Yeah,
comic
yeah.
relief there.
It's not a studio film at all.
Right, right, yeah, yeah,
It's like a documentary educational thing, right?
right. Yeah, don't go plowing into light poles with your car. So that's it, anyway, that's all I got. I think that does it, unless anybody else has anything else.
Move to adjourn.
Once, going twice, move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thank you, Medfield TV.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Chris and Bill.
Congratulations, Frank. You
And
survived.
welcome,
Survived
Frank.
your first meeting.
They're usually not this long.
Well, well, they don't start, we don't usually tack the hour onto the front end.
Yeah.
So-
That's
so
a
They
special
usually
treat.
are this long, but they don't start till 7. So.